The 1950s weren't just another decade. They were the years when imagination exploded across drive-ins, newspapers, and glowing living room TVs. The atomic age had just begun, and people weren't sure if science was going to save them or wipe them off the map. Out of that fear came a new kind of storytelling: worlds ending, creatures awakening, humanity staring at itself in the reflection of a mushroom cloud. Tonight, we dive into that golden age of cinematic madness. 11 films, nearly 2 hours of monsters, meteors, and mayhem. This is the ultimate 1950s sci-fi weird facts marathon, where every shadow hides a secret and every scream has a story. Let's start with the film that crawled out of the desert to change everything. In 1954, Warner Brothers unleashed something no one had ever seen before: giant radioactive ants crawling out of the desert to terrorize America. Them wasn't just another monster flick. It was the very first big bug movie, and it set the tone for a whole decade of atomic age nightmares. But here's the twist: the ants don't even show up until half an hour in. The film was almost shot in color and 3D. A young Leonard Nimoy shows up in a blink and you miss it cameo, and John Wayne himself got involved in a way that changed TV history. This are 16 weird facts about Them, the movie that should have bombed, but instead became one of the most influential monster films of all time. Number 1. The ants took their sweet time. You'd think a movie about giant killer ants would show them right away, right? Nope. Them holds back the reveal for nearly 30 minutes. For the first half hour, the film plays like a straight murder mystery. Desert patrols stumble across wrecked homes, missing people, and one traumatized little girl who can barely speak. The audience is left in the dark, piecing together clues just like the characters, with only eerie sounds and strange footprints hinting at what's coming. This slow burn was unusual for the time. Most creature features of the 1950s splashed the monster across the screen early to grab kids in the theater seats, but Them leaned into suspense. By delaying the reveal, the eventual appearance of those enormous ants hit twice as hard. When they finally march out of the desert, it's not just a monster attack, it's the payoff to a carefully built mystery. By the time audiences finally saw the ants, they were hooked. Number 2. Ants in 3D? Believe it or not, Them was almost one of the flashiest movies of the 1950s. The original plan was to shoot it in full color and 3D, the big Hollywood gimmicks of the time. Warner Brothers even ran early tests: massive ants leaping out of the screen, flamethrowers blasting right into your face, and bright desert landscapes bursting with color. But there was a problem. The special 3D cameras kept breaking down, and the color footage looked flat and muddy. Instead of risking a disaster, the studio pulled the plug and went back to standard black and white. Yet a few traces of that 3D dream survived. Certain scenes, like the opening credits and the flamethrower blast, were shot with the coming-at-you angle designed for stereoscopic projection. Even the ants busting through walls were staged to jump right at the lens. Today, those shots feel oddly dramatic in a movie that otherwise plays it straight. Little reminders of the wild version that never made it to the screen. In the end, the ants didn't need 3D glasses to be terrifying. Number 3. A red and blue warning. Even though Them was stripped of its fancy 3D and color plans, the filmmakers still wanted something eye-catching. Their solution? The opening title card. Against a stark black and white background, the word Them explodes in vivid red and blue. In the 1950s, this was a shocking effect, a jolt of color spliced right into a monochrome world. It instantly told audiences this wasn't just another desert thriller. Something monstrous was coming. The effect was so striking that many who saw the film on its first run never forgot it. Imagine sitting in a dark theater in 1954, the curtains pulling back, and suddenly those huge, colorful letters flashing across the screen. It felt almost radioactive, like the title itself had been blasted by the same atomic power that created the ants. Later, VHS and DVD releases preserved the effect, making sure the film's unique introduction survived across decades. It was a warning in bold colors. Danger was coming. Number 4. Real weapons, real veterans. Most monster movies rely on props and stage tricks, but Them went a step further. When the script called for soldiers with flamethrowers, the production didn't settle for fakes. They used real World War II flamethrowers, heavy, dangerous weapons on loan from the US Army. And to make sure things looked authentic, the men wielding them weren't just actors. They were actual World War II combat veterans, hired specifically because they knew how to handle the gear. It added a raw edge of realism to the film. These weren't stunt performers waving around plastic props. They were men who had seen battle, now pointing fire at giant mechanical ants. In a movie filled with puppets and sound effects, this choice gave the action sequences a surprising amount of grit. The flames shooting straight at the camera didn't just look dramatic, they were real, and audiences could feel the danger. In Them, The firepower was no illusion. Number 5. Behind the bug eyes. The true stars of them weren't the actors, they were the ants. But these weren't just rubber costumes or miniatures. The production built 2 enormous full-scale ant puppets, each a mechanical nightmare of gears, levers, and pulleys. One of them weighed nearly 12 tons and required a small army of technicians to operate. Painted a purplish-green hue with glowing red and blue eyes, the creatures looked terrifying under the harsh desert lighting. To make the ants come alive, teams of operators controlled every twitch, the mandibles snapping, the antennae quivering, the heads turning just enough to seem menacing. A second partial ant body was mounted on a massive crane for close-up shots, giving the impression of a monster looming directly over the cast. It was clunky, loud, and incredibly hard to manage, but on screen it worked. For audiences in 1954, these lumbering giants were unlike anything they'd ever seen. The ants weren't real, but the fear they created definitely was. Number 6. Nature's voice of terror. One of the most unsettling parts of them isn't what you see, it's what you hear. The ants don't just scuttle and roar like movie monsters usually do. Instead, they produce a high-pitched, eerie screech that makes your skin crawl long before the creatures even appear on screen. That sound became the film's secret weapon for building tension in the early scenes. But here's the twist. Those noises weren't invented in a lab. The sound designers mixed together the calls of tree frogs, hooded warblers, wood thrushes, and even a red-bellied woodpecker. Blended and distorted, they created something both natural and alien, a sound that felt alive but impossible to place. It was so effective that the same recordings popped up in other films for years after, becoming a hidden piece of Hollywood's monster soundscape. The ants didn't roar, they screamed, and audiences never forgot it. Number 7. Hollywood royalty in the desert. Them didn't just have giant ants, it had an all-star cast hiding in plain sight. Edmund Gwenn, the same actor who melted hearts as Santa Claus in Miracle on 34th Street, showed up as the wise old scientist. But this wasn't a passion project for him. Behind the scenes, insiders joked he only took the role to pay for his arthritis treatments, and you can spot moments where he's clearly in pain between takes. And then there was Leonard Nimoy. Long before he became Mr. Spock, Nimoy had a blink and you'll miss it cameo as a young army sergeant. It's almost surreal. One of the most iconic sci-fi actors of all time, tucked away in a monster movie about ants. The casting doesn't stop there. James Arness, who played the FBI agent, had already terrified audiences as the alien in The Thing from Another World just a few years earlier. Looking back, Them feels like a bizarre meeting ground of Hollywood legends. Some on the rise, some paying the bills, all fighting bugs. Pretty wild so far, right? We've seen how Them held back its monsters, nearly became a 3D spectacle, and even brought in an Oscar-winning Santa Claus alongside a young Leonard Nimoy. And we're only halfway through the nest of secrets this movie is hiding. If you're digging these forgotten Hollywood stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. It keeps these deep dives alive. Now, let's get back to the ants. Number 8. John Wayne's big recommendation. Sometimes, the impact of a movie reaches far beyond the screen. After Them hit theaters, one of its biggest fans turned out to be none other than John Wayne. The Duke himself went to see the film and was blown away by James Arness's performance as the tough FBI agent Robert Graham. Wayne was so impressed that he personally recommended Arness for the role of Marshal Matt Dillon in the new TV western Gunsmoke. That casting decision would define Arness's career, as he went on to star in the series for 20 years, becoming one of television's most iconic cowboys. In a strange twist, giant ants had indirectly helped launch one of the longest-running shows in TV history. So, while Them terrified audiences, it also made James Arness a household name. Number 9. Filming in a furnace. The desert scenes in Them might look simple on screen, but they were absolute torture to film. Cast and crew were sent out to the Mojave Desert, where temperatures soared past 110 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, imagine trying to deliver your lines under that scorching sun while dressed head to toe in heavy clothing that trapped every ounce of heat. Actress Joan Weldon later revealed that both she and Edmund Gwenn were forced to wear wool outfits during the shoot. Wool in triple-digit desert heat. Gwen, already struggling with advanced arthritis, needed help just to get off the set between takes. Yet, despite the pain and exhaustion, he delivered a performance that gave the film its heart and authority. It's a reminder that the magic of movies often comes at a brutal cost behind the scenes. For the cast of Them, the real monster wasn't the ants, it was the heat. Number 10. The Atomic Age Warning. Like so many science fiction films of the 1950s, Them didn't just end with a bang, it ended with a warning. After the ants are finally destroyed in the sewers, Dr. Medford delivers a chilling line.
When man entered the atomic age, he opened a door into a new world. What we'll eventually find in that new world, nobody can predict.
It was a reminder that the movie wasn't only about oversized insects, it was about nuclear anxiety, a fear that science had unleashed forces too big to control. This moral punch was typical of the era, echoing through films like The Day the Earth Stood Still and Godzilla. In them, the ants became a metaphor for what happens when humanity tampers with nature on an atomic scale. The real monster wasn't the bugs, it was the bomb. Number 11. The hidden mistake. For all the care that went into building the giant ants, not every shot went according to plan. In the original 1954 theatrical release, eagle-eyed viewers could occasionally spot something they weren't supposed to see: the inner workings of the ants. Panels would slip, or angles would betray the illusion, exposing gears, levers, and raw mechanics right there on the screen. It was the kind of mistake that could shatter the magic of the movie, turning a terrifying monster into an obvious machine. Later home video releases quietly corrected these slip-ups, trimming or cleaning the shots so that audiences wouldn't notice the puppet's guts spilling out. But for those who saw the first prints, it was a reminder of just how ambitious and fragile the practical effects really were. Even monsters have seams, and in them, a few of them showed. Number 12. The ending that never was. The climax of Them looks unforgettable today. Soldiers storming into the sewers of Los Angeles to wipe out the final colony of giant ants. But that wasn't the original plan. Screenwriter George Yates first imagined the ending taking place in the subways of New York City, a perfect symbol of ants invading the beating heart of civilization. Later, another rewrite shifted the finale to a Santa Monica amusement park, where roller coasters and carnival rides would frame the battle. Both of those ideas would have been spectacular, but they were also expensive. Warner Brothers wasn't about to spend that kind of money on a bug movie, so budget cuts forced the filmmakers to rethink everything. The solution? Move the action underground into the storm drains of Los Angeles. It was cheaper, logistically simpler, and still gave the finale a claustrophobic, creepy edge. Ironically, the sewers gave Them one of its most atmospheric sequences. Sometimes limitations don't kill creativity, they sharpen it. Number 13. Poster lies. If you saw the posters for Them back in 1954, you'd think the ants looked more like aliens than insects. The marketing showed monstrous bugs with cat-like human-style eyes glaring out at the audience, a design choice that had little to do with the actual creatures in the movie. Nobody really knows why the studio pushed this bizarre look, but one thing's clear: it grabbed attention. For kids passing theater lobbies or drive-in marquees, those glowing human-like eyes were impossible to ignore. They suggested something stranger, scarier, and even more grotesque than what the film actually delivered. In a way, the misleading artwork worked in the movie's favor. By the time audiences sat down, the tension was already sky high, and the film didn't have to work as hard to sell its terror. The posters lied, but they sold tickets. Number 14. Studio doubts, big payoff. When Them was in production, Warner Brothers didn't expect much. Studio head Jack Warner reportedly predicted the movie would flop. After all, who would pay to watch a film about giant ants? At best, they thought it would be another cheap matinee filler to cash in on kids looking for thrills. The film was made on a modest budget, and the marketing push was limited compared to the studio's more prestigious titles. But when Them hit theaters in June 1954, it shocked everyone. Instead of fading away, it pulled in more than $2.2 million worldwide, becoming Warner Brothers' highest-grossing film of the year. What was meant to be a quirky little monster movie turned into a bona fide hit, beating out far more serious productions. Even critics were impressed, calling it one of the best science fiction thrillers of its time. The ants Warner Brothers thought would bomb ended up crawling straight to the bank. Number 15. The Oscar snub. For a film that the studio barely believed in, Them ended up walking into awards season with serious recognition. In 1955, it was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Special Effects, an incredible honor for a giant bug movie. The practical ants, the flamethrower battles, and the eerie desert sequences had impressed not just audiences, but also the industry itself. But the ants didn't take home the gold. That year, the Oscar went to Disney's lavish 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, a film with a much bigger budget and a far grander reputation. Still, the nomination proved something important. Science fiction, once dismissed as kiddie fare, could be taken seriously. And Them had cracked the door open for the genre to step into Hollywood's spotlight. The ants may have lost the statue, but they won respect. Number 16. Pop culture legacy. For a movie about oversized ants, Them left giant footprints across pop culture. Its influence rippled through decades of monster cinema, inspiring films like Tarantula, The Black Scorpion, and The Deadly Mantis. It also carried an audio Easter egg that would become legendary, the Wilhelm scream, a stock sound effect used in Them, that went on to appear in Star Wars, Indiana Jones, and countless blockbusters. Even video games paid tribute. In Fallout 3, a side quest called Those features giant mutated ants in a clear nod to the 1954 classic. From Saturday matinee creature features to modern sci-fi, the DNA of them is everywhere. Its mix of Cold War anxiety, practical monster magic, and old-school suspense became a template that others would copy, but never quite surpass. The ants may be gone, but their echoes still crawl through our culture. Looking back, Them wasn't just another monster movie. It was the blueprint. From its delayed reveal of the creatures to its mix of war weapons, oversized props, and star-studded cameos, the film proved that science fiction could thrill audiences and earn respect at the same time. What started as a low-budget gamble became Warner Brothers' biggest hit of 1954 and a cornerstone of atomic age cinema. Its legacy still crawls across the screen today, whether in the sound of a Wilhelm scream, the influence on later bug-eyed monsters, or even a cheeky reference in a post-apocalyptic video game. Them showed that fear of the unknown could be packaged into pure entertainment, and that sometimes the scariest monsters are born from the anxieties of real life. So, which fact about Them surprised you the most? The real flamethrowers, John Wayne's unexpected role, or the ants that almost took over New York? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more hidden stories from Hollywood's strangest corners. The Earth survived giant ants, but it wasn't ready for this. Next up, Martians, panic, and the birth of apocalyptic sci-fi. War of the Worlds.
We could show them we're friendly, huh? Walk out there with a white flag.
We're friends!
Everybody understands when you wave the white flag, you want to be friends? That's right!
We're friends!
Yeah!
Imagine kicking off one of the boldest sci-fi films of all time, only to find out you don't even have the legal right to make it. That's how chaotic the production of War of the Worlds really was. Behind the Martian heat rays and city-crushing war machines was a story of lawsuits, accidents, censorship battles, and desperate last-minute fixes that could have buried the movie before it ever reached theaters. This wasn't just a simple adaptation of H.G. Wells' classic. It was a roller coaster of blown budgets, bizarre special effects tricks, and risky stunts that nearly cooked the crew alive. So buckle up. These are 12 shocking, weird, and downright unbelievable facts about War of the Worlds. Number 1. Paramount started filming without the rights. You'd think a giant studio would make sure they legally owned a story before spending millions filming it. Not Paramount. They thought their 1925 deal with the H.G. Wells estate gave them movie rights forever. But there was a catch. That old contract only covered a silent film version. By the 1950s, sound films were the standard, which meant the entire production of War of the Worlds was basically illegal. Imagine the panic. Cameras were already rolling, actors were in costume, and suddenly lawyers realized the studio didn't even have the right kind of rights. Paramount scrambled, cut a new deal with the Wells estate, and only then could they legally keep filming. One of the greatest sci-fi movies ever made started its life on shaky, almost criminal ground.
We know now that we can't beat their machines. We've got to beat them.
Number 2. The Martian war machines were almost flying saucers. When people think of War of the Worlds, they picture those eerie manta ray-shaped war machines gliding through smoke and rubble. But that design wasn't the original plan at all. At first, Paramount wanted flying saucers, the classic UFO you'd see on every pulp magazine cover. The problem? By the early 1950s, UFO hysteria was everywhere. News reports, tabloids, conspiracy theories. Audiences were already drowning in stories of little green men. The filmmakers worried the movie would look like just another cheap alien flick. So they scrapped the saucers and went bold. Special effects legend Al Nozaki designed the sleek, curved war machines we know today. Part manta ray, part cobra, with cobra-like necks shooting deadly heat rays. It gave the film an identity that still feels alien decades later.
Dr. Forrester, get out of here! Everybody out of here! Everybody
Number 3. Special effects were a nightmare. The Martian war machines looked incredible on paper, but bringing them to life nearly broke the crew. They were suspended by visible wires, which reflected the studio lights like crazy. No matter how much they adjusted, the wires ruined take after take. The solution? Smear the wires with baby oil and blast them with arc lights to make them vanish on film. It worked. Barely. And it forced the effects team to invent tricks on the fly, turning each battle scene into a high-stakes experiment.
Defense is useless against that kind of power!
Number 4. The actors were nearly cooked alive. The Martians weren't the only ones bringing the heat. The set itself turned into an oven. To simulate the burning destruction caused by Martian weapons, the crew relied on gigantic carbon arc lamps, some of the hottest and brightest lights available at the time. These things blasted so much heat that the temperature on set skyrocketed to well over 130 degrees. Actors stood under the beams in heavy costumes while cameras rolled, and it wasn't long before people started collapsing. Extras fainted, makeup literally melted off faces, and crew members had to rotate in and out just to keep filming going. One cameraman later said it felt like standing in front of the sun. The irony? The Martians never touched a single actor. It was the movie magic itself that nearly wiped them out.
And I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
Number 5. Censorship almost killed the violence. The 1950s were not exactly friendly to movies that pushed the envelope. When Paramount submitted War of the Worlds to the censors, they nearly had a meltdown. Exploding cities, burning bodies, and screaming crowds. Too much for the family audiences of the era. Some officials demanded the studio tone down the chaos, especially the scenes showing panicked civilians being fried by Martian heat rays. Paramount fought back, arguing that the destruction was the whole point. It wasn't a polite alien visit, it was the end of the world. In the end, a few shots were trimmed, but the film kept its terrifying edge. Critics later called it one of the most intense sci-fi movies of its time.
Hurry up! Jump in!
There was a girl with him. If I could find her.
Come on, jump in, will you? Come on. It's your last chance to get out of here.
Number 6. Alien blood wasn't alien at all. When the filmmakers needed Martian blood, they didn't turn to some futuristic lab. They went to the local butcher. The alien fluid splattered on screen was nothing more than dyed animal organs and blood, pulled straight from a slaughterhouse. The effects team mixed in green coloring to give it that otherworldly vibe, then carefully filmed the mess under harsh lights so it would glisten and ooze. Audiences gasped in horror. But if they'd known it was basically butcher shop leftovers, the reaction might have been less sci-fi shock and more gross. Pretty wild so far, right? And we're only halfway through. Keep watching, because coming up, we've got a near-fatal on-set explosion, the director's breaking point, and even the laugh-out-loud Martian designs that almost ruined the movie. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's next. Number 7. The sound of the Martians came from animals. The filmmakers wanted the Martians to sound terrifying, something inhuman that would stick in your head. But back in 1953, there were no digital effects, no fancy synthesizers. So the sound team had to get creative. They ended up layering together animal cries, scraping metal, and electronically distorted recordings until it formed the eerie, high-pitched shriek that became the Martian's voice. Rumor has it, they even used distorted recordings of a tortured pig to get the unsettling effect. The result? A sound so alien and unnatural that audiences squirmed in their seats. It was unforgettable. But it wasn't the only trick the sound team pulled. In fact, one of the film's most iconic effects came from an accident in the editing room.
Something moved out there.
There's nothing there now.
It was one of them.
Number 8. The heat ray sound was discovered by accident. The Martian heat ray had to sound like nothing on Earth. Deadly, alien, and unforgettable. But no one could agree on what death by laser should actually sound like. The sound team tried whirs, pops, even explosions, but everything felt too familiar. Then, in a stroke of luck, an engineer stumbled across the noise made when striking an electric guitar string with a metal object, then playing it backward through an echo chamber. Add in some electronic distortion, and suddenly they had it. The piercing, otherworldly zap that audiences would never forget. It wasn't just a sound effect, it was a sonic trademark of alien destruction. Decades later, it's still one of the most iconic sound cues in sci-fi history. Number 9. Actors clashed behind the scenes. On screen, humanity was united against an alien invasion. Off screen? Not so much. The main cast didn't always get along, and tension bubbled under the surface during long, grueling shoots. Anne Robinson, who played Sylvia, later admitted she struggled with co-star Gene Barry's intensity. Barry was known for being meticulous, sometimes too meticulous, and it slowed filming to a crawl. Crew members whispered about the two trading sharp comments between takes, though they always pulled it together once the cameras rolled. It wasn't a full-blown Hollywood feud, but it added just enough drama to an already stressful production. And speaking of stress, the director himself nearly reached a breaking point before the movie was finished.
something. Can't you go higher?
No, the air will be full of jets in a minute. There they are!
Number 10. Director Byron Haskin nearly broke down. Guiding War of the Worlds was no easy ride for Byron Haskin. He'd been a respected effects artist before becoming a director, but this film pushed him harder than anything he'd tackled before. Every day brought a new disaster. Wires showing up on film, sensors breathing down his neck, actors fainting under the heat lamps, and studio executives demanding faster progress. Haskin was caught between creative ambition and constant crisis management. At one point, insiders claimed he nearly walked off the project entirely, exhausted by the non-stop pressure. But somehow, he stuck it out, keeping the production on track even when it looked like the film might collapse. The breakdown never came, but the toll was obvious. By the time the movie wrapped, Haskin looked more like a man who'd survived an alien invasion than someone who had directed one. Number 11. A set accident nearly turned deadly. Big sci-fi effects in the 1950s meant big risks. During one climactic sequence, rigged explosions were set to go off as actors ran for cover. The timing was supposed to be precise. Fireballs would erupt just after the cast cleared the danger zone. But something went wrong. One of the charges detonated early, sending a blast of heat and debris frighteningly close to the actors. Crew members dove for cover, and a cameraman swore he felt his eyebrows singe off. For a moment, everyone thought they'd just witnessed a fatal accident. Luckily, no one was seriously hurt, but the scare rattled the entire set. From then on, the explosions were double-checked and rehearsed with almost military precision.
Gotta make a run for it. Come on.
Number 12. The first Martian designs were laughable. Everyone remembers the Martians as slimy, glowing-eyed creatures that looked unsettlingly alien. But the early designs, they were downright goofy. The first concept sketches showed them as little more than oversized, bug-eyed puppets with floppy limbs. When the prototypes were tested on set, the crew couldn't stop laughing. Instead of terrifying, they looked like children's toys. The effect killed the mood instantly. Realizing disaster was imminent, the design team scrapped everything and started over. They eventually settled on the more menacing, clawed creatures we see in the final cut, eerie enough to haunt audiences, yet mysterious enough to keep most of the terror hidden in the shadows. It was a last-minute save that turned embarrassment into nightmare fuel. Number 13. The wires wouldn't stay hidden. The Martian war machines were supposed to glide through the air like unstoppable predators. In reality, they dangled from wires, and those wires became the crew's biggest nightmare. No matter how they lit the models, the wires kept catching the studio lights. In the pristine Technicolor prints of 1953, most audiences didn't notice. But as the film aged and color faded, the wires started to pop out like sore thumbs. By the time TV reruns hit in the 70s and 80s, fans were laughing at the floating toys on strings instead of ducking under their seats. It wasn't until the 2018 4K restoration that technicians finally fixed the problem. By going back to the original 3-strip negatives, they adjusted contrast and digitally painted out reflections, making the machines look terrifying again. The aliens didn't just invade Earth, they accidentally exposed Hollywood's trickiest strings.
Take my word for it, General. Sense is useless against that kind of power. Hold him as long as you can. Right there.
Number 14. The budget was swallowed by special effects. War of the Worlds had a production budget of about $2 million. Serious money for 1953. But here's the kicker. More than half of it, around $1.3 to $1.4 million, went straight into special effects. Miniature cities had to be built and destroyed, Martian war machines wired up and lit, explosions timed to the second, and alien goo cooked up in the lab. It was a non-stop drain on the budget. For context, most big studio dramas at the time cost less than $1 million total, meaning this sci-fi spectacle burned through more on effects alone than many films did on everything. The gamble paid off. The Oscar-winning visuals turned a pulp invasion story into a landmark of cinematic spectacle, but it left Paramount executives sweating, because one delay, one failed shot, and that mountain of cash would have gone up in smoke.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Number 15. The UK thought it was too scary. When War of the Worlds crossed the Atlantic, British censors weren't impressed. They were horrified. Exploding cities, panicked crowds, and bodies turned to ash. For 1953 audiences, it was considered way too intense. The film was slapped with an X certificate, which at the time meant it was restricted to adults only. Imagine that. a science fiction adventure being treated like a horror movie. Local councils even pushed back, arguing the rating was unfairly harsh. But the ruling stuck, and for years the film was barred from younger audiences in the UK. Only later, after its reputation as a sci-fi classic was secure, did the rating get relaxed. But in its day, War of the Worlds was literally considered too frightening for kids. Number 16. The Martian machines lived on and then melted down. The copper-green war machines are unforgettable, but their story didn't end with the credits. Byron Haskin, the director, later reused the same designs in his 1964 film Robinson Crusoe on Mars. If you watch closely, the alien ships look suspiciously familiar because they were literally recycled from War of the Worlds. But the real twist? Only a handful of the original models survived. Several of the copper-made machines were reportedly melted down for scrap in the years after filming. Hollywood treated them like junk instead of preserving them as history. Today, collectors would pay fortunes to own one, but most are gone forever. It's a strange fate. Iconic Martian invaders reduced to scrap metal, while their legend lived on in sci-fi cinema. From almost filming the whole movie illegally, to roasting actors under blistering heat lamps, to Martians that looked more like puppets than invaders, War of the Worlds was chaos from start to finish. And yet, out of all the disasters, stress, and last-minute saves, it became one of the most influential sci-fi films ever made. It didn't just scare audiences in the 1950s, it set the stage for every alien invasion blockbuster that followed. So, what fact shocked you the most? Was it the butcher shop alien blood, the illegal filming, or those laughable early Martians? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to hit subscribe for more untold stories from behind the movies you thought you knew. From invasion to introspection, now we slow the pulse and meet an alien who didn't come to destroy, but to warn, the day the Earth stood still.
We still don't know what it is or where it comes from, but there's something there. It's been tracked around the Earth by radar, traveling at a rate of 4,000 miles an hour. This is not another flying saucer scare. Scientists and military men are already agreed on that. Whatever it is, it's something real.
In 1951, a flying saucer landed in Washington, D.C., and cinema was never the same. The day the Earth stood still wasn't about monsters or ray guns. It was a warning: stop fighting or face destruction. Cold War fears, atomic anxiety, and a desperate plea for peace turned this into more than just a sci-fi flick. It became a mirror, showing humanity its own chaos through the eyes of an alien and his unstoppable robot. And behind the camera, the story gets even wilder. Blacklists, gibberish that became legend, and design tricks decades ahead of their time. This are 16 weird and hidden facts about the day the Earth stood still. Number 1. Real-life tensions. The world of 1951 was a powder keg. World War II had just ended. The atomic bomb was fresh in everyone's mind, and the Cold War was turning neighbors into enemies. Fear wasn't just in the headlines, it was in every living room. Producer Julian Blaustein saw that tension and knew Farewell to the Master wasn't just a sci-fi tale. It was a message. He pushed to adapt it into a film that would warn humanity about its new obsession with bigger bombs and endless conflict. The alien Klaatu wasn't just a character, he was a cinematic messenger sent to tell us enough is enough. So when the saucer lands and soldiers open fire, it wasn't fantasy, it was reflection. The violence on screen mirrored the world outside the theater, and audiences suddenly realized this wasn't about outer space at all.
I want to meet with representatives from all the nations of the Earth.
Afraid that would be a little awkward. I want to be frank with you. Our world at the moment is full of tensions and suspicions.
Number 2, short story origins. Before the saucer, before Gort, before Klaatu ever set foot on Earth, there was a short story. Harry Bates's Farewell to the Master hit the pages of astounding science fiction in 1940, and it flipped the alien script. Up to that point, extraterrestrials were usually monsters, creatures meant to invade, conquer, or annihilate. But Bates gave us something radical, an alien who wasn't a destroyer, but a protector. A being who arrived not with death rays, but with dignity and a mission to save humanity from itself. And the kicker? In the original story, the powerful robot wasn't named Gort at all. He was called Gnut. One small name change later, cinema gained one of its most iconic robots, and science fiction gained a legend.
Agrees. There is grave danger. The question remains, what can we do to protect ourselves? What measures can we take to neutralize this menace from another world?
Number 3, title shuffle. Names matter. And believe it or not, The Day the Earth Stood Still almost didn't sound that epic. The studio toyed with titles like Farewell to the Master, and even The Clunky Journey to the World. It wasn't until late in development that the now iconic title stuck. Simple, urgent, mysterious. It promised an event so massive, even the planet itself would freeze in awe. Imagine if they hadn't changed it. Would a movie called Journey to the World have burned itself into cinema history? Probably not. Titles don't just label a film, they can decide its destiny. Number 4, Robert Wise at the helm. Robert Wise wasn't a sci-fi guy. Fresh off a Civil War Western, he was the last person you'd expect to take the wheel of a spaceship. But when Fox handed him the script, he saw more than aliens. He saw a chance to say something urgent about the atomic age. Wise later admitted the story hooked him instantly. Here was a film that used spectacle not just to entertain, but to warn. And under his direction, the message of restraint and sanity cut through louder than any explosion. Looking back, it was a career-defining gamble. The man who would go on to direct West Side Story and The Sound of Music first shook the world with a flying saucer. And sci-fi has never been the same since.
We know from scientific observation that your planet has discovered a rudimentary kind of atomic energy. We also know that you're experimenting with rockets.
Yes, that is true.
So long as you were limited to fighting among yourselves with your primitive tanks and aircraft, we were unconcerned. But soon, one of your nations will apply atomic energy to spaceships. That will create a threat to the peace and security of other planets. That, of course, we cannot tolerate.
Number 5, military rejection. When Klaatu's saucer touches down, soldiers, tanks, and guns surround it. It looks like the US military in full force, except it wasn't. The Pentagon flat out refused to cooperate with the production. Officials read the script and didn't like what they saw. A story critical of violence, suspicion, and armed conflict. So the filmmakers had to get creative, borrowing equipment from Fort Meade instead of official military support. It was a quiet act of rebellion baked right into the movie. And the irony? A film about the dangers of fear and aggression was rejected for being too honest about fear and aggression. Sometimes the truth stings hardest when it's on screen. Number 6, casting what-ifs. When casting began, the studio wanted a familiar face. Spencer Tracy and Claude Rains were at the top of the list. Hollywood heavyweights who could bring instant gravitas to Klaatu. For a moment, it looked like Earth's alien messenger would be a big-name star, but Robert Wise had other ideas. He wanted someone less recognizable, a face that carried mystery instead of celebrity. That choice led him to Michael Rennie, whose calm, otherworldly presence gave Klaatu his quiet power. Looking back, it was the perfect gamble. Rennie wasn't a superstar, but he became immortal in that role. Sometimes, not being the obvious choice is exactly what makes a legend. Number 7, Patricia Neal's giggles. Patricia Neal didn't think she was making a masterpiece. To her, it felt like just another cheap saucer flick, and when it came time to deliver the now iconic line, Klaatu Barada Nikto, she almost burst out laughing. Neal later admitted she struggled to say it with a straight face. Even Michael Rennie, standing tall as Klaatu, teased her with dry humor whenever she cracked a smile. What looked deadly serious on screen was nearly derailed by giggles behind the camera, and yet that moment became the film's most legendary command. The words she nearly laughed through turned into one of the most famous phrases in sci-fi history. Sometimes the line you least expect becomes the one that lasts forever.
Good. Klaatu, Barada, Nikto. Klaatu, Barada, Nikto.
Pretty wild so far, right? And we're only halfway in. We've still got Gort's painful secrets, real astrophysics hiding on a chalkboard, futuristic designs inspired by Frank Lloyd Wright, and even the blacklisted professor who almost got cut from the film. If you're hooked, make sure to hit like and subscribe. It keeps the saucer flying. Now, let's get back to it before Klaatu and Gort shut us down. Number 8, Gentle Giant Gort. Behind the towering menace of Gort wasn't a machine at all, but a man named Locke Martin. An usher at Grauman's Chinese Theater, he stood over 7 feet tall. His size alone perfect for an indestructible robot. But inside that bulky suit, the role was anything but easy. The costume was made of thick foam rubber, laced front and back, trapping heat and making it nearly impossible to move. Martin would get so weak and overheated that director Robert Wise had to schedule frequent breaks just to keep him on his feet. Even the scene where Gort lifts Helen wasn't real strength. Wires did the heavy lifting. Yet despite the struggle, Martin's performance stuck. The Gentle Giant gave sci-fi one of its most iconic robots, right up there with R2-D2, C-3PO, and the Terminator. And he did it while nearly collapsing inside a sauna of a costume.
Gort, declare to Roscoe.
Number 9, real science on the blackboard. In most sci-fi movies, blackboards full of equations are just scribbles. Not here. When Professor Barnhart fills the board with complex formulas, every mark was rooted in real astrophysics. The filmmakers hired UCLA scientist Dr. Samuel Herrick to supply authentic calculations. What you see is his research on the three-body problem, one of the most difficult puzzles in celestial mechanics. Even Klaatu's quiet correction of the math was designed to feel plausible, not Hollywood fluff. And the kicker? Actor Sam Jaffe, who played Barnhart, had once taught math himself. So when he stared at those equations, he wasn't just acting, he actually understood them. Number 10, MPAA intervention. When Klaatu is gunned down and later brought back to life, it's one of the film's most powerful moments. But the censors at the MPAA weren't impressed. They were nervous. The idea of a character with unlimited power over life and death felt a little too close to divine territory. So the filmmakers had to rewrite. They added a line clarifying that Klaatu's resurrection was temporary, and that ultimate power belonged only to the Almighty. It was a small tweak, but enough to calm religious fears. And funny enough, that compromise didn't weaken the story. It gave it more edge. Because now, Klaatu wasn't a god, he was a warning. And that made his message hit even harder. Number 11. Frank Lloyd Wright's Saucer Touch. The spaceship in the day the Earth stood still wasn't just a movie prop. It was architecture from the future. Production designer Thomas Little consulted none other than Frank Lloyd Wright, America's most famous architect, to help shape its look. The result? A ship so smooth and seamless it felt alive. Wright's idea was radical. The saucer should appear to heal itself, with doors that left no trace once closed. That's why the craft looks like a single, unbroken shell, decades before modern design embraced minimalism. It wasn't just futuristic, it was believable, and that's the magic of it. A spaceship designed like a work of art, not a toy. One that still looks strikingly modern more than 70 years later. Number 12. Herman's radical soundtrack. From the very first notes, you know this film sounds different. That eerie humming score wasn't just background music, it was an experiment. Composer Bernard Herrmann built an orchestra like no one had ever seen. He used not one, but two theremins, an electronic instrument you play without touching. Add in electric strings, multiple organs, vibraphones, even reversed audio tracks, and the result was alien music that felt truly otherworldly. Audiences had never heard anything like it in 1951. And here's the legacy. That sound became the blueprint for decades of sci-fi. Every weird alien hum in later films owes a debt to Herrmann. He didn't just score a movie, he invented the sound of space itself. Number 13. Sam Jaffe Blacklisted. Professor Barnhart, the Einstein-like genius who listens to Klaatu, was played by Sam Jaffe. But getting him into the movie was almost impossible. In the paranoid days of the Red Scare, Jaffe had been blacklisted for refusing to testify before Congress. The studio worried his name alone could sink the film. Political suspicion was everywhere, and casting a controversial actor was seen as risky business. But Robert Wise stood firm. He wanted Jaffe, and Jaffe stayed. The irony is almost too perfect. A movie about fear and prejudice nearly lost its voice of reason to fear and prejudice. Sometimes the story behind the camera echoes the one on screen.
Sit down, please. There are several thousand questions I'd like to ask you.
Number 14. Klaatu Barada Nikto Origins. It's the most famous line in the movie, yet it means absolutely nothing. Screenwriter Edmund North simply made up the words Klaatu Barada Nikto because they sounded strange and alien. No secret code, no hidden language, just pure invention. But audiences loved the mystery. The phrase took on a life of its own, popping up in Star Wars as character names and becoming a running gag in Army of Darkness. It's one of those rare moments where nonsense became legend. And to think, Patricia Neal nearly giggled through the delivery. Her line, born out of nothing, grew into one of the most iconic commands in science fiction history. Sometimes the words you don't understand are the ones you never forget. Number 15. Box office success on a modest budget. The Day the Earth Stood Still wasn't made on a blockbuster budget. With just $1.2 million behind it, the studio expected a tidy little sci-fi picture, not a cultural milestone. But audiences packed the theaters anyway. By the end of its run, the film had earned over $3.7 million domestically, triple its cost. For a 1951 release, that was a serious return, especially for a genre still treated like pulp. It proved that science fiction could draw big numbers, not just niche fans. And that's the real twist. The movie wasn't just a warning about humanity's future. It was proof that smart, daring stories could sell. Sci-fi wasn't cheap thrills anymore. It was big business. Number 16. Genre game changer. When it first hit theaters, The Day the Earth Stood Still was only a moderate success. Critics liked it. Audiences were intrigued, but it didn't instantly crown itself as a classic. No one knew it had just changed the future of science fiction. Over time, its influence grew. The National Film Registry later preserved it as culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. And from then on, sci-fi films weren't just Saturday matinee fodder, they were taken seriously as art, philosophy, and social commentary. That's the legacy. One flying saucer landing in Washington, one alien plea for peace, and suddenly, the genre was never the same again. It wasn't just a movie, it was the moment sci-fi grew up. From Cold War paranoia to Frank Lloyd Wright's spaceship, from real astrophysics on a chalkboard to gibberish that became legend, The Day the Earth Stood Still was never just another sci-fi movie. It was a strange cocktail of fear, creativity, and bold ideas, all wrapped up in a flying saucer. What began as a modest production turned into a blueprint for the genre. It showed that science fiction could be smart, serious, and profitable, while still thrilling audiences with robots and alien warnings. Every sci-fi epic that followed, from 2001 to Star Wars, owes a quiet debt to Klaatu and Gort. So, which fact about The Day the Earth Stood Still surprised you the most? Was it the blacklisted professor, the futuristic architecture, or Patricia Neal almost cracking up at cinema's most serious command? Drop your favorite in the comments, because even after 70 years, this story still makes the Earth stand still. One message ignored. Now the sky is falling. It's time for humanity's last ride into the unknown, when worlds collide.
The planet Zyra will pass very close to us, close enough to influence the tide. Oceans will be torn from their depth. Tidal waves hundreds of feet high will sweep in from the coast. There will be giant earthquakes. Soon after, Belus will come into direct collision with the Earth. Our world will end.
In 1951, before Armageddon, before Deep Impact, before Hollywood had CGI to destroy the Earth, one movie did it first, and did it for real. When Worlds Collide dared to show humanity watching its own extinction, in color, at the dawn of the atomic age. But behind those melting planets and heroic rocket launches was chaos. Lost versions, miniature miracles, and a director who made actors scream for real. The film that critics laughed off as too dark ended up predicting everything from climate collapse to modern disaster movies. This is the story of When Worlds Collide, the end of the world that changed Hollywood forever. Number 1. A modern Noah's Ark. Before the first shot even rolls, When Worlds Collide makes one thing clear. This isn't just science fiction, it's prophecy. The movie opens with a direct quote from the book of Genesis, warning of humanity's arrogance before destruction. Producer George Pal wasn't subtle about it. He saw the story as a modern retelling of Noah's Ark, but instead of faith and wood, it was built on physics and steel. The parallels are everywhere. A doomed Earth, a chosen few, and a desperate race to build a vessel to preserve life. Even the rocket launch echoes the biblical flood, as oceans rise and fire consumes everything left behind. Pal believed the atomic age had made mankind its own god, and he used that tension, science versus salvation, as the film's moral core. It wasn't just about escaping a planet, it was about asking whether humanity deserved to start over.
But those who will make the flight will be chosen by lot sometime before the worlds collide. Now, only about 40 persons can be taken. And already there are more than 600 people working on this project.
Number 2, rejected by the critics, rescued by history. When Worlds Collide hit theaters in 1951, most critics weren't impressed. The New York Times called it cold comfort and accused it of lacking human warmth. Reviewers dismissed the idea of Earth's destruction as too far-fetched and the performances as stiff and melodramatic. To the post-war movie crowd, the concept of a runaway planet smashing into Earth was pure pulp, not serious cinema. But time flipped that verdict. Decades later, film historians and directors began to realize what George Pal had accomplished with almost no precedent and no digital tricks. His doomsday vision became the foundation of every disaster blockbuster that followed. From Deep Impact and Armageddon to Don't Look Up, the imagery of tidal waves, collapsing cities, and scientists arguing while the clock runs out all started here. What critics once mocked as impossible turned out to be prophetic. Number 3. Filming on borrowed time. When Worlds Collide was made under brutal conditions. Paramount gave George Pal a shoestring budget and barely 4 weeks to shoot the entire live-action portion. The clock was ticking, and every scene had to count. Actors recalled working 12-hour days with almost no breaks, while set builders raced to keep up with a schedule that was collapsing faster than the world in the movie. When filming finally wrapped after just 27 days, the real challenge began: the special effects. While the cast had finished, the effects team kept working for twice that time. Months of miniature destruction, layered matte shots, and hand-painted skies. It was a war of patience and precision, fought frame by frame. The irony? A movie about the end of the world was nearly undone by its own deadline. Number 4. The rocket was modeled after the V-1 flying bomb. That sleek ark ship humanity builds to escape Earth wasn't born from imagination. It was born from war. George Pal and his art department modeled the rocket on the Nazi 5-1 buzz bomb, one of the first long-range weapons ever used against civilians during World War II. They studied footage of its launches frame by frame, mimicking the harsh metallic shape, the fiery exhaust, and even the way it shuddered during ignition. The result was a rocket that didn't look like a toy or a dream machine. It looked like something mankind might actually build in panic. Functional, fast, and dangerous. Its militaristic design reminded audiences that humanity's greatest inventions often come from fear, not hope. By basing his arc on a weapon of destruction, Pal turned survival itself into a moral question. Can something born of war carry humanity to salvation? Number 5. Melting planets and miniature worlds. Long before CGI, When Worlds Collide created the end of Earth with nothing but wax, heat, and genius. For the film's unforgettable planetary destruction scenes, the effects crew built massive wax models of Earth and the approaching planet Zera. They then blasted them with hot lights and heaters, filming the slow melt at high speed. When played back, the wax seemed to buckle and dissolve like a dying world ripping apart in space. Each sequence was filmed inside a sealed black set to mimic the darkness of space, with colored gels and backlighting, creating fiery bursts and molten patterns. Layered with smoke, matte paintings, and lightning effects, the visuals fooled audiences into believing they were watching the planet implode. What looked like cosmic annihilation on screen was, in reality, a melting candle the size of a basketball. Number 6. Underwater sound effects. When the world shakes apart and when worlds collide, the sound feels heavy. Not like an explosion, but like the planet itself groaning. To get that eerie realism, the sound department tried something no one had done before. They filled metal tanks with water, tossed in rocks and debris, and recorded the rumbles underwater. The result was a deep, resonant vibration that carried a strange, suffocating tone, as if the Earth were crying out from beneath its own oceans. These sounds were then slowed down and layered with thunder, collapsing wood, and distorted engines to create the feeling of tectonic collapse. In 1951, with no synthesizers or digital libraries, every sound had to be invented from scratch. It wasn't just movie magic, it was literal sonic experimentation beneath the surface. Number 7. Cecil B. DeMille's lost adaptation. Decades before, When Worlds Collide hit theaters, legendary director Cecil B. DeMille tried to make it himself. In 1933, hot off the Sign of the Cross, he bought the rights to the novels When Worlds Collide and After Worlds Collide with plans to craft an enormous biblical-scale epic titled The End of the World. Concept art was drawn, sets were planned, and Paramount even commissioned preliminary effects work. But the Great Depression gutted studio finances, and DeMille's apocalyptic dream was shelved. For nearly 20 years, the idea gathered dust until George Pal rediscovered the project and pushed it into production. Ironically, Pal ended up realizing much of what DeMille envisioned, a modern-day flood story where technology replaced faith and rockets took the place of arcs. DeMille imagined it as prophecy. Pal turned it into spectacle. Two filmmakers, one shared obsession, humanity's final second chance. Pretty wild so far, right? We've seen biblical prophecy collide with science, melted planets filmed out of wax, and even Cecil B. DeMille's lost version of the apocalypse. And we're only halfway through the chaos. If you're enjoying this deep dive into Hollywood's earliest doomsday, now's the perfect time to hit like, subscribe, and hype this video. It keeps these forgotten classics alive. Alright, let's fire up the rockets and get back to the end of the world. Number 8. Paramount's Panic Pitch. When George Pal first pitched When Worlds Collide to Paramount executives, they wanted nothing to do with it. A movie about the planet exploding? Too dark, too grim, and way too expensive. But Pal wasn't one to give up. He brought in concept art, matte paintings of fiery skies, tidal waves swallowing cities, and the final rocket launch. The room went silent. In that moment, the pitch turned into a prophecy. The executives realized what Pal already knew. Audiences weren't afraid of the end of the world. They were fascinated by it. The paintings sold the movie before a single frame of film was shot. Within days, Paramount reversed course and greenlit production. The apocalypse had a new home in Hollywood, all because one producer knew how to make destruction look beautiful. Number 9. A cast of unknowns. When Worlds Collide went into production, George Pal made a bold choice. He skipped the stars. Instead of filling the film with box office names, he cast mostly unknowns. Richard Dare, who played the lead scientist, was a Broadway actor with barely any film experience. Barbara Rush, who portrayed Joyce, had only a few small credits to her name. To audiences, they weren't celebrities. They were ordinary people facing the end of everything. It was a gamble that paid off. The lack of famous faces made the story feel eerily real, almost like a newsreel from the future. Viewers could project themselves onto the characters, not glamorous heroes, but scientists, engineers, and families scrambling for survival. Barbara Rush would go on to win a Golden Globe just 2 years later for another sci-fi classic, It Came from Outer Space. But here, in 1951, she was simply one of the last women left on Earth. Number 10. A cinematographer turned director. The man behind When Worlds Collide wasn't a typical Hollywood director. He was one of its best cameramen. Rudolph Maté, who directed the film, had spent decades behind the lens, shooting masterpieces like DOA, The Passion of Joan of Arc, and foreign correspondent. George Pal hired him because he wanted the apocalypse to look beautiful, not chaotic. Matei's eye for composition gave the movie its painterly, almost dreamlike look. Cities crumble in perfect symmetry, rockets gleam under theatrical light, and every frame feels balanced, like the end of the world captured by an artist. While most sci-fi films of the 1950s looked cheap and clunky, When Worlds Collide had elegance, visual rhythm, and color that felt almost biblical. Matei once said he wanted to make the impossible look inevitable, and that's exactly what he did. Number 11. Rolling sets and real reactions. To make audiences feel the earth tearing apart, George Pal's crew literally made the ground move. They built several key sets, including the rocket hangar and the collapsing city interiors, on massive rolling platforms. When it came time to film the earthquakes, stagehands violently shook the platforms using industrial levers and pulleys, often without warning the actors. The result? Genuine terror. You can actually see some performers stumble, grab furniture, or shout over the noise. Reactions that weren't scripted. Pal wanted authenticity, and he got it the hard way. Even the cameras were tied down to keep them from tipping during the chaos. In a movie about planetary destruction, the panic on set wasn't acting, it was survival. Number 12. Oscar glory for special effects. For all its modest budget, When Worlds Collide stunned Hollywood's technical community. Its miniature cities, wax planets, and fiery rocket launches were so advanced for their time that the Academy couldn't ignore them. In 1952, the film received an honorary Academy Award for special effects, presented to veteran effects artist Gordon Jennings, whose team had spent months perfecting the illusion of planetary doom. Jennings had already won Oscars for Reap the Wild Wind and Spawn of the North, but this one meant something different. It was recognition that science fiction, once dismissed as pulp, could achieve true cinematic artistry. His effects work would go on to influence the next decade of films, culminating in the War of the Worlds just 2 years later. It wasn't just a trophy, it was Hollywood's first real acknowledgement that sci-fi could look spectacular and be taken seriously. Number 13. A quiet ending, a loud question. When the survivors finally step onto Zira, there's no speech, no music swelling in triumph, just silence and a title card that reads, It's a single phrase that turned a bleak ending into a glimmer of hope. After everything, the floods, fire, and extinction, the movie dared to suggest that destruction might also be renewal. George Pal believed the ending didn't need words. The silence let the audience fill in their own meaning. Was this humanity's rebirth, or just another chance to make the same mistakes? It's one of the simplest, most haunting codas in early science fiction. In 1951, that question hung heavy, not as fantasy, but as a warning to a world already living under the shadow of the bomb. Number 14. A placeholder ending that stuck. The movie's final shot, that peaceful sunrise over a new world, wasn't a grand special effect at all. George Pal originally planned a sweeping matte painting, showing the survivors stepping onto the lush planet Zira, with twin suns rising over alien mountains. But when production ran out of money and time, the visual effects team only had a color concept sketch from famed space artist Chesley Bonestell. Rather than scrap it, Pal used it as is. That simple painted image, barely more than a still illustration, became the film's iconic closing moment. It was quiet, haunting, and strangely perfect after all the chaos that came before. Audiences thought they were seeing the dawn of a new civilization. In reality, they were looking at a piece of concept art taped to the back of a set. Number 15. The sequel that never was. The story wasn't supposed to end with that sunrise on Zira. George Pal always planned a sequel, After Worlds Collide, based on the second novel by Philip Wiley and Edwin Ballmer. The follow-up would have shown humanity rebuilding civilization on their new planet, clashing over power, faith, and survival in a world with two suns. Early concept art and sketches even imagined new cities carved into alien cliffs and the remnants of another species that once lived there. Paramount initially agreed, but when Pal's later space film Conquest of Space flopped in 1955, the studio pulled the plug. The project was quietly buried, and no footage was ever shot. For decades, After Worlds Collide remained one of Hollywood's most talked about lost sequels, a vision of hope that never left the launch pad. The world had ended on screen, but behind the scenes, its future never got the chance to begin. Number 16. Pop culture echoes. For a film made in 1951, When Worlds Collide never really disappeared, it just kept echoing through pop culture. In the Rocky Horror Show, the lyric,
"But when worlds collide," said George Pal to his bride,
immortalized the movie's name for a new generation. Its DNA is also visible in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, Deep Impact, and Armageddon, all borrowing its mix of science, sacrifice, and spectacle. Even modern visual effects artists still reference it. The movie's use of miniature destruction and forced perspective became a textbook example of practical world building before the digital era. For decades, filmmakers studied it to understand how tension and scale could be achieved with light, smoke, and human imagination alone. When Worlds Collide began as a doomsday warning and ended as a prophecy that Hollywood would never stop replaying. Looking back, When Worlds Collide wasn't just a 1950s sci-fi thriller, it was a mirror reflecting humanity's fear of its own future. George Pal turned a pulpy apocalypse story into a moral parable, where technology, faith, and arrogance fought for control of mankind's fate. In an era still reeling from nuclear war, he dared to show the end of the world not as punishment from God, but as a consequence of human progress. Every shot, from melting wax planets to the trembling rocket launch, was a glimpse of ambition colliding with limitation. The movie's effects team created the impossible with nothing but paint, heat, and steel, proving that imagination could destroy and rebuild worlds long before computers existed. So, which part of When Worlds Collide blew your mind the most? The real wax planets, DeMille's lost version, or the prophetic final warning that still hits home today? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more hidden stories behind Hollywood's greatest apocalypses. The dust settles, the stars shimmer, and paranoia creeps in. Maybe they're not attacking us, maybe they're already here. It came from outer space. A blinding streak tore across the desert sky, and for a moment, America held its breath. When It Came from Outer Space hit theaters in 1953, it didn't just bring aliens to Earth, it brought humanity face to face with its own paranoia. Written by Ray Bradbury and directed by Jack Arnold, it flipped the invasion formula on its head, painting visitors from the stars not as conquerors but as castaways. It wasn't about war, it was about fear, the kind that hides in plain sight. These are 16 weird facts about It Came from Outer Space, the film that made the 1950s look to the skies and wonder if the real threat was already here. Number 1. A legend born from the mind of Ray Bradbury. Before the cameras rolled or the desert winds howled, It Came from Outer Space began in the imagination of Ray Bradbury, one of the greatest science fiction writers of all time. Universal hired him to craft a treatment called the meteor, and he delivered not one but two versions. One where the aliens were invaders, and another where they were peaceful travelers who crash-landed by mistake. In a move that shocked even Bradbury, the studio chose the gentler one. Bradbury's fingerprints are all over the movie. The lonely desert, the small-town dreamers, the poetic dialogue that turns fear into philosophy. He saw aliens not as monsters, but as mirrors reflecting our humanity. That was radical for 1953, when space creature usually meant kill it before it lays eggs. And just like that, Bradbury's empathy changed the shape of sci-fi forever. Number 2. The aliens weren't invaders. They were just trying to go home. In a decade when every spaceship on screen carried death rays and conquest, It Came from Outer Space did something unthinkable. It made the aliens innocent. When a strange object crashes in the Arizona desert, the townspeople assume the worst. But the truth is, the visitors just want to repair their ship and leave. They mimic human forms only to blend in, terrified of the violence they know is coming once they're discovered. This twist flipped the entire alien attack formula on its head. Instead of monsters threatening mankind, it's mankind that becomes the real threat. Suspicious, armed, and blinded by fear. The movie dared to ask audiences to sympathize with the other, years before that became common in science fiction. Long before E.T. phoned home, Bradbury's aliens were already begging for mercy. Number 3. Director Jack Arnold fought to keep the monsters unseen. Universal executives wanted a spectacle. Glowing eyes, rubber claws, the full 3D thrill show. But director Jack Arnold had something smarter in mind. He believed fear worked best when the audience couldn't see what was hiding in the dark. Instead of showing the aliens right away, he used shadows, reflections, and flickers of movement to build suspense. The first glimpse of the creature's point of view, distorted, wobbly, half-human, became one of the most memorable shots in 1950s sci-fi. Arnold argued with the studio to delay the reveal, even threatening to walk if they forced early close-ups. His restraint paid off. By keeping the aliens mysterious, he made audiences imagine horrors far worse than any rubber mask could deliver. Sometimes, what you don't see is what truly crawls under your skin.
I cut my hand. See?
Who is it, Ben?
What's wrong?
Nothing. Son, I guess. Playing tricks on me.
Number 4. Universal's first 3D experiment changed sci-fi forever. In 1953, the 3D craze was exploding. Studios were desperate to pull audiences away from television. Universal decided to gamble big, and It Came from Outer Space became their first 3D feature film. The crew used a dual camera setup that projected two reels side by side through polarized lenses. It was heavy, hot, and painfully slow to operate, but the results were jaw-dropping. Viewers swore they could reach out and touch the meteor as it screamed across the screen. Unlike other studios that used 3D for cheap jump scares, Jack Arnold used it to pull audiences into the desert, giving every tumbleweed and shadow a sense of eerie depth. Critics were stunned that a gimmick could feel poetic. Suddenly, 3D wasn't just a trick, it was a storytelling tool. It didn't just pop off the screen, it changed how people saw outer space itself. Number 5. A meteor made from fire and iron. The film opens with a blinding streak tearing across the sky. A meteor crash that sets everything in motion. But that unforgettable moment wasn't a fancy optical trick. The meteor was actually a hollow iron sphere, rigged with burning magnesium and suspended on nearly invisible wires. Special effects artists shot it in slow motion against a black backdrop, then composited it into the desert sky. The result looked otherworldly, even dangerous, especially in 3D, where it felt like the flaming rock might slam right into your face. On set, the crew nicknamed it the Fireball, because every test shot risked setting something on fire. Magnesium burns white hot, and if the timing was even a second off, it could melt the wires or explode mid-take. But the danger was worth it. The crash became one of the defining images of 1950s sci-fi. That burning ball wasn't just a prop, it was the spark that lit a new age of fear and fascination. Number 6. Filmed in the real Mojave Desert, with danger in the heat. The movie's dusty isolation wasn't just acting, it was real. Much of it came from outer space was shot on location in the Mojave Desert, near Palmdale and Victorville, California, under brutal heat that scorched the equipment and drained the cast. The desert winds blew sand into cameras, tore at lighting rigs, and left the crew constantly battling dehydration. Jack Arnold wanted authenticity, not soundstage sand, so the team hauled heavy 3D cameras across dunes that hit 120 degrees Fahrenheit by midday. Actors recalled hallucinating from the glare as they stumbled through takes, pretending to chase meteors while trying not to faint. Even seasoned technicians said it was one of the toughest shoots of their careers, but the result was worth it. The horizon looked endless, and the isolation felt real. That vast, shimmering emptiness became a character all its own, silent, watchful, and waiting for something to fall from the sky.
It's alive.
And yet it looks so dead out there.
Oh no, it's alive and waiting for you.
Number 7. Barbara Rush won a Golden Globe and didn't expect it. When It Came from Outer Space premiered, no one thought it would turn its leading lady into an award winner. But Barbara Rush, who played Ellen Fields, brought something rare to 1950s sci-fi: warmth, intelligence, and quiet strength. Amid the paranoia and panic, she grounded the story with genuine emotion, and audiences noticed. A year later, she won the Golden Globe for Most Promising Female Newcomer in 1954, beating out actresses from far bigger films. Rush later admitted she never saw it coming. She thought the movie was just another space picture, not realizing how much its human core resonated with audiences. The award launched her into major studio roles throughout the decade, but she always looked back on It Came from Outer Space as the film that taught her subtlety could outshine spectacle. She wasn't just the heroine, she was the human heart that made outer space feel close to home.
Listen to me.
I'm sorry. We did not want to use violence. Now there's no other way.
Number 8. The uncredited composers who made space sing. That eerie, quivering sound that opens the film, the one that makes your skin crawl before a single alien appears, came from 3 men whose names never made it to the credits: Irving Gertz, Herman Stein, and a young Henry Mancini. Together, they created one of the earliest and most influential space soundscapes in cinema. Using theremins, blaring brass, and experimental tape layering, they made the desert itself seem alive, humming with invisible electricity. Universal's system at the time treated music like a studio asset, so these composers were paid flat fees with no acknowledgement. Still, their score helped define how outer space would sound for the next 2 decades: haunting, melodic, and full of mystery. Mancini would later win Oscars for Breakfast at Tiffany's and The Pink Panther, but his first brush with the cosmos started right here, uncredited, in a dark sound booth. Long before John Williams or Jerry Goldsmith, space already had a voice. They just never got to sign it. Number 9. A design too weird for this film ended up in this island, Earth. Universal's makeup department went wild, designing the aliens for It Came from Outer Space. Early sketches showed towering insectoid creatures with glassy eyes and tentacled faces. But director Jack Arnold thought they looked too grotesque for the story's tone. He wanted mystery, not monsters. The studio agreed, shelving several elaborate designs before settling on the shimmering, amorphous look glimpsed through the alien's point of view. But those rejected concepts didn't stay buried for long. Just 2 years later, some of the same molds and ideas were dusted off and reused in 1955's This Island Earth. Specifically, the design that became the iconic Metaluna mutant with its veiny brain and bulging eyes. What was too weird for Bradbury's poetic aliens became perfect for a full-blown cosmic showdown. Even in failure, it came from outer space, shaped the face of 1950s science fiction. Literally. Pretty wild so far, right? And we're only halfway through the crash site. If you're loving these hidden Hollywood stories, subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive into classic sci-fi, and hit that hype button to boost the video so more old school monster fans can find it. All right, let's head back to the desert. The night's not over, and neither are the aliens. Number 10. Bradbury's father inspired the film's small-town lineman. In the movie, one of the most grounded and relatable characters is the humble telephone lineman, a man caught between ordinary life and extraordinary events. That detail wasn't random. Ray Bradbury based it on his own father, Leonard Bradbury, who worked as a lineman in Tucson, Arizona. Growing up, Ray watched him disappear into the desert to repair cables under endless skies, and that image stuck with him. A lone man, surrounded by static and silence, listening for faint signals in the dark. When Universal bought the Meteor, Bradbury wove that memory into the story. The lineman became a symbol of connection, a bridge between humanity and the unknown. It's why the film feels so personal, even among its special effects and shadows. Behind every scene of cosmic mystery, there's a son writing a quiet tribute to his father. In a story about alien contact, Bradbury's most powerful signal still came from home. Number 11. The Cold War paranoia that shaped every line. It came from outer space, landed right in the heart of 1953, the year America was gripped by McCarthyism, nuclear dread, and the constant fear of infiltration. Ray Bradbury and Jack Arnold used that tension as the film's invisible villain. The aliens could look like anyone, sound like anyone, be anyone, a perfect reflection of a society terrified that the enemy might already be living next door. Every scene hums with that unease. Neighbors whisper, the sheriff doubts his own eyes, and suspicion spreads faster than truth. Yet, unlike most films of the era, this one turns the paranoia on its head. The aliens aren't the danger. We are. It's our fear, our trigger-happy instincts, that turn the desert into a battlefield. It wasn't just sci-fi. It was a mirror held up to 1950s America, and it didn't blink. Number 12. Bradbury's quiet war over credit. Behind the scenes, a different kind of battle was brewing. Not over aliens or 3D cameras, but over authorship. Ray Bradbury had written the original story, and detailed treatment that birthed It Came from Outer Space. Yet when the final credits rolled, screenwriter Harry Essex received sole billing. Bradbury was furious. He claimed Essex mostly tweaked dialogue while the story tone and even much of the wording were his own. Universal's legal team downplayed Bradbury's involvement, arguing his outline didn't qualify for official credit. But historians and film scholars have since compared the drafts, and they're unmistakably Bradbury's voice. The lonely desert towns, the poetic monologues, the empathy for outsiders, all classic hallmarks of his writing. He lost the credit on paper, but not in history. Fans still know whose imagination built the Black Mountain sky. Number 13. The lost message of peace ending that never made it to screen. Ray Bradbury's original treatment ended on a note of quiet wonder. After the aliens repaired their ship, they were meant to leave behind a glowing message of peace. Written in the desert sand, a final act of connection between two worlds. But Universal executives thought it was too sentimental, even risky during the Cold War. They wanted mystery, not mercy. The gesture was cut, and the film now ends with the spaceship vanishing into the stars, leaving humanity uncertain and uneasy. Bradbury reportedly mourned that decision. He saw it as the soul of his story, proof that understanding could conquer fear. The studio, worried about box office appeal, replaced it with ambiguity instead. Still, that hopeful heartbeat never vanished completely. It lingers in the film's tone, in the way the protagonist watches the sky, not with hatred, but with awe. The peace message may have been erased, but its echo still glows between the stars. Number 14. The strange rumor of comedian Maury Amsterdam in uniform. Among the oddest legends floating around It Came from Outer Space is the claim that comedian Maury Amsterdam, best known later for The Dick Van Dyke Show, appears as a background soldier during the crash site scenes. Fans have slowed down footage, paused grainy frames, and sworn they can spot him in a helmet near the meteor crater. But no production records, call sheets, or Universal payroll logs ever list his name. Film historians have tried to confirm it for decades. But it remains one of those strange Hollywood mysteries, a rumor that refuses to die. Some even think the resemblance might be a trick of the 3D lighting or film grain that distorted faces in the background. Whether it's a hidden cameo or just wishful thinking, the idea of a sitcom star accidentally wandering into alien history is a legend too fun to let go. Number 15. A low-budget hit that doubled its money. For a film made on a modest $800,000 budget, It Came from Outer Space turned into one of Universal's biggest surprises of 1953. The studio expected a niche sci-fi curiosity. Instead, it earned $1.6 million in US and Canadian rentals alone, effectively doubling its cost. That was massive for a thoughtful, dialogue-driven story that had no big stars, no city-destroying monsters, and almost no action scenes. Audiences came for the 3D spectacle, but stayed for the mystery, and word of mouth turned it into a steady earner across drive-ins and matinees. The success proved that science fiction didn't need to rely on explosions or giant ants to sell tickets. It just needed imagination and a pulse of humanity. It was proof that ideas could outgrow special effects, even in outer space. Number 16. The film that taught Hollywood to fear its own reflection. When the dust settled and the credits faded, It Came from Outer Space had done more than entertain. It had redefined what science fiction could be. It wasn't just about aliens or meteors, it was about us. It showed that humanity's greatest fear wasn't invasion from the skies, but the realization that we might be the villains in our own story. That shift, from horror to introspection, rippled through every sci-fi film that followed. Movies like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, The Day the Earth Stood Still, and Close Encounters all trace their DNA back to Bradbury's desert. Even decades later, filmmakers cite its empathy, atmosphere, and poetic tension as a turning point. It was the moment science fiction grew up, when the genre stopped shouting and started asking questions. In the end, the aliens didn't come to destroy humanity. They came to show it its own reflection. And we're still looking. It Came from Outer Space wasn't just another flying saucer flick. It was a mirror held up to the human condition. Beneath its B-movie title and cardboard sets, it carried something timeless: empathy. Ray Bradbury's story and Jack Arnold's direction turned what could have been a simple invasion tale into a warning. Not about aliens, but about us. Our fear, our suspicion, our desperate need to control what we don't understand. 70 years later, its message still lands like a signal from the stars. Curiosity is braver than fear, and understanding is the only thing that keeps us human. The meteors, the desert, the echoes of 3D spectacle, they're all just surface. The real story is what happens when we finally stop pointing our weapons and start listening. So, before you go scanning the night sky, do me one favor. Subscribe for more untold stories from classic sci-fi, and hype this video so others can rediscover the film that dared to make fear feel human. Because the truth still might be out there, but maybe it's been inside us all along. Still watching? You, my friend, are officially one of the late-night sci-fi faithful. Don't forget to hit subscribe and hype this video. It helps keep these forgotten classics alive and brings more old Hollywood chaos to your screen. Now, grab a snack. The invasion continues. And now, the fear becomes personal. Neighbors, friends, lovers, all replaced by something cold. Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
No, seriously, what's the trouble?
It's my cousin.
Wilma? What's the matter with her?
She has a, well, I guess you'd call it a delusion. You know her uncle, Uncle Ira.
Sure.
Miles, she's got herself thinking he isn't her uncle.
How do you mean, that they're not really related?
No, she thinks he's an imposter or something, someone who only looks like Ira.
Have you seen him?
I just came from there.
Well, is he Uncle Ira or isn't he Uncle Ira?
What if I told you one of the most paranoid films in history was never meant to be political at all? In 1956, Invasion of the Body Snatchers terrified audiences with its vision of a town quietly taken over by perfect, soulless duplicates. A nightmare that felt a little too close to real life in Cold War America. Shot fast, cheap, and under studio pressure, it accidentally captured the fear of its entire generation: conformity, control, and the loss of identity. The result became one of the most influential sci-fi thrillers ever made. These are 16 facts about Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the film that started as a B-movie and ended up defining what paranoia on screen really looks like. Number 1. A sci-fi classic shot in just 23 days. Director Don Siegel didn't have money, time, or studio faith on his side. Just grit. The entire movie was filmed in only 23 days, a sprint that would have broken most productions. Every scene had to be blocked, lit, and shot with military precision. There was no luxury for reshoots or retakes. If the camera rolled and no one tripped, it was printed. Siegel's no-nonsense direction turned necessity into style. The fast pacing gave the film a raw, nervous energy that perfectly matched its story of creeping paranoia. You can actually feel the tension of a crew racing the clock to finish before the studio pulled the plug. What started as a low-budget rush job ended up capturing the urgency of invasion itself. Fast, silent, and unstoppable. Number 2. The alien pods cost less than a new car. Those eerie seed-like pods, the ones that spawned lifeless human duplicates, looked like expensive movie magic. In reality, they were built on a tiny budget of around $30,000 total, crafted from papier-mâché, latex, and creative lighting tricks by production designer Ted Hallworth. Each pod was handmade, filled with gels and foam to pulse under the lights, and doused with fog to hide imperfections. They were fragile, messy, and constantly collapsing under the heat of the studio lamps. The crew often had to rebuild them overnight just to keep filming on schedule. Cheap as they were, those fake pods became iconic. Proof that terror doesn't need money, just imagination. Even today, that moment when the duplicates emerge from their pods remains one of the most haunting images in sci-fi history. Number 3. It was almost called Sleep No More. Before it became Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the film had a very different name, Sleep No More. Director Don Siegel and writer Daniel Mainwaring pushed for that title because it hinted at the story's eerie mix of exhaustion and paranoia. But the studio wanted something flashier, something that would sell tickets in big bold letters on a 1950s marquee. Allied artists overruled the creative team, choosing Invasion of the Body Snatchers instead. Siegel hated it at first, calling it cheap sensationalism. Yet the title worked. Audiences couldn't resist the promise of an alien invasion lurking inside their neighbors. Ironically, the title the studio forced on him became one of the most unforgettable in science fiction history. It's hard to imagine the same fear spreading under the softer name Sleep No More. Number 4. A dark ending. The studio tried to erase. Don Siegel's original ending was brutally bleak. Dr. Miles Bennell screaming helplessly on the highway, warning drivers that humanity was already lost. That was supposed to be the final image, a gut punch of hopelessness that mirrored the paranoia of the era. But the studio panicked. Executives at Allied Artists thought the film was too grim and demanded a new opening and ending to soften the blow. They forced Siegel to add the hospital framing scenes, turning the story into a flashback and giving it a faint glimmer of hope. Siegel always said the studio ruined his perfect ending, but audiences didn't seem to mind. Even with that compromise, Invasion of the Body Snatchers still left viewers shaken, walking out of theaters wondering if anyone around them was truly human. Number 5. Theaters turned their lobbies into alien nurseries. When Invasion of the Body Snatchers hit theaters, studios knew they had something eerie on their hands, and they leaned all the way in. To hype the film, cinemas across America filled their lobbies with life-sized papier-mâché pods, eerie lighting, and cardboard cutouts of the cast frozen in mid-scream. Some exhibitors even hired staff to dress as pod people and silently wander the lobby, creeping out moviegoers before the film even started. It was part marketing stunt, part psychological warfare, and it worked. Crowds lined up, buzzing with rumors that the pods might actually move. It was low-budget promotion at its finest, the kind of practical showmanship that made 1950s sci-fi feel real, even before the lights went down.
You said you saw it there just now. Why did you come here tonight? You had just become aware of a curious, unexplainable epidemic mass hysteria. So your mind started playing tricks, and reality became unreality. I know, Miles, this is all hard to believe, but these things happen.
Number 6. They almost got Orson Welles, or Edward R. Murrow. Before cameras rolled, producer Walter Wanger wanted to add a touch of prestige. His idea? A dramatic prologue, narrated by Orson Welles, or famed broadcaster Edward R. Murrow, introducing the true story of the pod invasion like a chilling news bulletin. It would have blurred the line between fiction and reality, turning the movie into a mock report about humanity's downfall. But director Don Siegel hated the idea. He believed the story should feel discovered, not explained. Adding a narrator, he argued, would break the illusion of paranoia creeping up on the audience. The proposal was scrapped before a single frame was shot. Welles and Murrow never lent their voices, but the film didn't need them. Its fear spoke loudly enough, a nightmare that didn't require anyone to tell you it was real. Number 7. Real nights, real darkness. In the 1950s, most Hollywood night scenes were faked, shot in daylight with filters and tinted film stock. But director Don Siegel refused to cheat. He demanded every nighttime scene in Invasion of the Body Snatchers be shot at night. No shortcuts, no tricks. It was a brutal choice. The crew worked through freezing California nights, battling wind, moisture, and exhaustion. Lighting rigs had to be rebuilt constantly, and the film's small budget didn't allow for extra setups or overtime. Still, Siegel believed real shadows created real fear. The gamble paid off. Those deep, grainy nighttime shots gave the movie its haunting realism, a world that looked like yours, just darker, emptier, and one step away from being replaced.
Miles, where do they come from?
I don't know. If they are seeds or seed pods, they must grow someplace on a plant, probably. And somebody or something wants this duplication to take place.
But when they're finished, what happens to our bodies?
I don't know. When the process is completed, probably the original is destroyed or disintegrates. No, wait!
Pretty wild so far, right? And we're only halfway through. From Orson Welles' rejected narration to all-night shoots that nearly broke the crew, Invasion of the Body Snatchers was already becoming more unsettling behind the camera than on screen, but the real paranoia is just beginning. Studio clashes, political whispers, and the eerie coincidences that made this film feel like a mirror of its own time. If you're enjoying this deep dive, don't forget to subscribe and hype this video. It helps more movie fans discover these strange, forgotten stories from Hollywood's golden age. Let's keep going. Number 8. Phone lines. Dead, on and off screen. In the movie, one of the first signs that something is terribly wrong in Santa Mira is when no one can reach the outside world. The phone lines are suddenly dead, cutting the town off completely. It was a perfect symbol of isolation and paranoia. But ironically, the real production faced the same problem. The film was shot partly in the quiet hills of Sierra Madre, California, where communication lines were unreliable. Crew members struggled to coordinate with the studio, often working long hours without phone contact or even radio clarity. That eerie overlap, a story about a town cut off from humanity, filmed in a location that literally lost touch with the world, added a layer of unintended realism. On and off screen, Santa Mira was truly alone.
Is Dr. Bennell there?
Yes, I'll get him.
Never mind. Just tell him the Sacramento circuits are still busy and ask him if he wants me to keep trying.
All right, hold on. Miles, the circuits are still busy.
Well, tell her to keep trying. Also try San Francisco and Washington.
Number 9. A 23-day schedule that still ran long. Don Siegel prided himself on efficiency, but even with his tight 23-day plan, Invasion of the Body Snatchers ran 3 days over schedule. The reason? Endless night shoots and unpredictable weather in the hills of Sierra Madre. Equipment froze, fog rolled in, and actors were often shooting until dawn just to capture a few usable takes. Allied artists started to panic as costs climbed, but Siegel pushed through, refusing to compromise the film's eerie realism. "You can't fake fear," he said, and he meant it. The exhaustion on the actors' faces in those late-night scenes wasn't acting, it was survival. In the end, the overrun barely dented the budget, but it gave the film its most haunting atmosphere, a world that feels like it's falling apart in slow motion.
You didn't go to sleep.
So tired.
They weren't people. It was more of them. They're growing thousands of pods in greenhouses. We've got to get away.
Number 10. Critics slept on it until decades later. When Invasion of the Body Snatchers premiered in 1956, most critics shrugged it off. The film was released as part of a double feature, often paired with lighter B-movies, and reviewers dismissed it as just another alien flick in a crowded sci-fi market. Even Allied artists treated it like filler content rather than a prestige picture. But over time, that quiet release became part of its legend. Audiences kept talking about the movie, its eerie realism, its suffocating tension, its ending that hit too close to home. By the 1970s, film scholars were calling it one of the defining works of Cold War cinema, and new directors like George Lucas and Ridley Scott cited it as a major influence. The critics may have missed it at first, but the pod people didn't stay buried. They crept back, quietly, until the world finally caught up. Number 11. The hidden message beneath the horror. When Invasion of the Body Snatchers first came out, audiences couldn't stop arguing about what it really meant. Was it an anti-communist warning about losing individuality to a collective hive mind, or a critique of McCarthyism, showing how fear turns people into identical, obedient shells? Even author Jack Finney, who wrote the original story, denied any political intent. He claimed it was simply about people losing their humanity, not about Washington or ideology. But director Don Siegel wasn't so sure. He later admitted that every viewer saw their own fears reflected in it, and that's what made it powerful. The truth is, no one can fully agree, and that's the genius of it. Whether you see it as politics, paranoia, or pure nightmare, Body Snatchers holds up a mirror that still feels uncomfortably real. Number 12. Too serious for its own studio. Allied artists didn't know what to do with Invasion of the Body Snatchers. When the executives saw Don Siegel's first cut, they panicked. It was too bleak, too quiet, too real. They wanted a crowd-pleasing alien spectacle, not a psychological nightmare about identity and fear. So, they stepped in. They demanded narration, the hospital framing story, and even suggested new dialogue to make it clearer for audiences. Siegel fought back, arguing that ambiguity was the point, that the horror came from not knowing if the invasion could be stopped. The studio won that battle, but not the war. Even with their added optimism, the movie's tone stayed chillingly hopeless. What Allied artists feared would confuse audiences instead made history, a B-movie that thought too deeply and scared too smart.
Danger!
Go on, get out of here!
You're endangered! Please!
Get out of here!
Go on, get out of here! Get out of here!
Number 13. Santa Mira was just Los Angeles in disguise. The sleepy California town of Santa Mira, where neighbors smile by day and turn soulless by night, doesn't actually exist. The film's eerie small-town backdrop was stitched together from real locations in Sierra Madre and Los Angeles backlots, cleverly disguised to feel like one cohesive place. Storefronts were redressed overnight, fake street signs were bolted to lampposts, and the same few blocks were shot from multiple angles to make the town seem larger. Even the winding highway where Dr. Bonnell screams, "You're next!" was filmed on a road just outside Los Angeles. That mix of real and artificial gave Santa Mira its uncanny feel. Familiar, but slightly wrong. It looked like the world you knew, just hollowed out, the perfect home for pod people. Number 14. The real horror. No emotion at all. Forget lasers and monsters. The terror in Invasion of the Body Snatchers came from something far simpler, a lack of emotion. The pod people were perfect physical replicas, but inside they were empty. No love, no anger, no guilt, just calm efficiency. That idea terrified 1950s audiences because it mirrored real life. Post-war America was obsessed with fitting in. Same jobs, same houses, same smiles. The film hit a nerve by showing what happens when individuality disappears completely. You're still you, but you don't feel anything anymore. It was a horror so subtle that it didn't need blood or violence, just a quiet stare, a familiar face, suddenly void of soul. And that emptiness, more than any alien, is what still chills audiences today. Number 15. Pod people enters the dictionary. Invasion of the Body Snatchers didn't just change sci-fi, it changed the language. After the film's release, the term pod people slipped into everyday conversation, used to describe anyone who seemed emotionless, robotic, or blindly conformist. By the 1960s, journalists were calling politicians pod people, and critics used it to mock the growing uniformity of suburbia. It's one of the rare moments when a B-movie idea became part of cultural DNA. Even today, the phrase shows up in politics, memes, and late-night talk shows, shorthand for losing your humanity in a world that demands sameness. The irony? A cheap movie made in less than a month created a metaphor that's lasted nearly 70 years, and that's one invasion we never escape. Number 16. From B-movie to Hall of Fame. What began as a modest studio thriller ended up immortalized among the greats. In 1994, Invasion of the Body Snatchers was officially added to the U.S. National Film Registry, recognized as culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. It now sits beside films like Citizen Kane and Casablanca. Not bad for a movie once dismissed as drive-in filler. The honors didn't stop there. The American Film Institute later ranked it among the top 10 sci-fi thrillers of all time, and its influence can be seen in everything from Alien to Get Out. Directors, critics, and fans still cite it as one of the purest examples of cinematic paranoia ever made. It's the ultimate twist ending. A movie about emotionless conformity became one of the most distinctive and enduring films in Hollywood history. For a film made on a shoestring and dismissed as pulp, Invasion of the Body Snatchers became one of cinema's greatest accidents. A movie that defined paranoia without ever meaning to. Beneath its low-budget sets and papier-mâché pods was a reflection of everything America was afraid to admit. The fear of blending in, of losing yourself, of waking up one morning and realizing the world no longer feels human. It wasn't the loudest or flashiest sci-fi of its time, it was the quietest. That's why it still gets under your skin. It doesn't scream, it whispers. They're already here. So, which fact surprised you the most? Let me know in the comments. And if you haven't yet, subscribe and hype this video to help more classic film fans discover the stories hiding behind Hollywood's most haunting nightmares. Just when you thought it was safe to go back to the water, a new terror rises from the deep, creature from the Black Lagoon.
But we know nothing about this lagoon.
I can tell you something about this place. My boys call it the Black Lagoon, the paradise. Only they say nobody has ever come back to prove it. We'll do it.
What if the last great universal monster wasn't born in a Gothic castle or a mad scientist's lab, but deep beneath the surface of a Black Lagoon? In 1954, Creature from the Black Lagoon terrified audiences with something they'd never seen before, a monster that wasn't dead, undead, or alien, but alive, primitive, beautiful, and heartbreakingly lonely. Shot in 3D, sculpted in secrecy, and inspired by a strange myth told at a Hollywood dinner party, this film became one of the most haunting stories of the atomic age. Behind every shimmering underwater scene, there were near drownings, lost credits, and legends that shaped generations of filmmakers. So grab your oxygen tank, hold your breath, and dive with me into the murky depths of 16 wild, true stories behind Creature from the Black Lagoon. Because what lurked under that surface wasn't just a monster, it was the future of horror itself. Number 1. The Creature had 2 actors, not one. One monster, 2 men. That's the secret behind the Gill-Man's haunting realism. On land, it was Ben Chapman, lumbering through the lagoon's muddy sets under layers of heavy latex and heat so intense it left him dehydrated by midday. But underwater, everything changed. There, the creature became Riku Browning, a professional diver from Florida whose smooth, weightless movements turned horror into hypnotic beauty. Browning could hold his breath for nearly 4 minutes, long enough to glide past the camera in total silence, giving the illusion of an otherworldly being that didn't need to breathe at all. What makes this dual performance so fascinating is how perfectly their work blended. Chapman's slow, menacing gait on land gave the creature power. Browning's fluid underwater choreography gave him grace. Two completely different styles, stitched together so seamlessly that audiences believed it was one creature moving between worlds. In truth, it was two men, risking heat exhaustion and blackouts just to make the monster feel real. That's what made the Gill-Man unforgettable. A monster built on teamwork, sweat, and lungfuls of courage.
Mark, we're out for photographs for study, not trophies. This thing, alive and in its natural habitat, is valuable to us.
Well, why settle for a photo when we can get the real thing?
Number 2. The poster was painted by a legend. Before audiences even saw the creature rise from the water, they were already hooked by a single image. The theatrical poster for Creature from the Black Lagoon remains one of the most recognizable in horror history. The Gill-Man clutching a screaming woman as bubbles swirl through an emerald abyss. That unforgettable artwork came from Reynold Brown, a young illustrator who would later define the entire look of 1950s sci-fi. Brown's brush gave Universal's monsters their teeth again, transforming pulp horror into pop art myth. What makes this poster special isn't just the skill, it's the tone. Brown captured the movie's perfect contradiction. Terror and beauty locked in one desperate embrace. His bold colors and exaggerated motion made the creature seem both violent and strangely romantic, echoing the film's Beauty and the Beast undertones. It wasn't just marketing, it was storytelling in one frozen moment. Long before the first scream echoed in theaters, Reynold Brown had already made the creature immortal. Number 3. It became Universal's final great monster icon. By 1954, Universal's golden age of monsters was fading. Dracula's cape had lost its shadow. Frankenstein's bolts were more nostalgia than nightmare, and the Wolfman's howl echoed mostly on late-night TV. Then, out of nowhere, the studio unleashed something new. Something that didn't lurk in castles or cry under full moons. The Gill-Man wasn't a myth or a curse. He was a living relic of evolution itself, dragged from the depths of time to face the modern world. That made him terrifying in a fresh way. Not supernatural, but possible. Audiences fell in love instantly. Kids begged for creature toys. Theaters sold out of 3D screenings, and critics called him the missing link between classic horror and science fiction. He became the bridge between eras, the last of the original Universal monsters and the firstborn from atomic age anxiety. The world was afraid of what humanity might awaken next, and the Gill-Man embodied that fear with scales and sorrow. The Black Lagoon didn't just close an era, it crowned it. Number 4. The creature's boat scenes were shot on Universal's Backlot Lake. The film might take place deep in the steamy jungles of the Amazon, but many of its river shots were actually filmed in the middle of Hollywood. Those iconic boat scenes, with the Rita gliding through mist and moonlight, were shot on a park lake, a man-made body of water on Universal's own backlot. The same lake had hosted Frankenstein's monster, the Invisible Man, and even Abbott and Costello, a quiet patch of California that somehow transformed into the edge of the unknown every time the cameras rolled. Cinematographers filled the tank with fog, hung vines from cranes, and shot low to hide the studio walls. Between takes, actors stepped from the Amazon straight into parking lots and coffee breaks, but on film it worked. The shadows, the reflections, the still water, it felt real. That's the magic of old Hollywood. A few tricks, some clever lighting, and suddenly you're 1,000 miles away. In truth, the scariest part of the Amazon was only a few steps from stage 12.
There he is!
Number 5. A tragic beauty and the beast heart beats inside the monster. At its core, Creature from the Black Lagoon isn't just a monster movie. It's a love story doomed from the start. Beneath the scales and the snarls, the Gill-Man isn't hunting, he's reaching. When he rises from the depths and sees Kay Lawrence, played by Julie Adams, something inside him changes. The terror in his eyes isn't just hunger, it's curiosity, maybe even longing. The filmmakers deliberately wove a Beauty and the Beast theme into the story, turning the monster into a lonely soul, caught between instinct and desire. That emotional undercurrent is what made audiences remember him long after the credits rolled. He wasn't a killing machine like Godzilla or a symbol of science gone wrong. He was a creature yearning for connection, punished for it at every turn. The more he tried to reach the surface, the more violently the world pushed him back down. It's tragedy in Rubber and Water, and it hits harder than any scream. The Gill-Man didn't just want to survive, he wanted to be seen. Number 6. Rico Browning's aquatic grace redefined monster movement. Most movie monsters stomp, snarl, and crash through walls, but the Gill-Man glided. Underwater, he moved with a strange elegance, almost hypnotic, thanks to the man inside the suit, Rico Browning. A champion diver and Florida native, Browning brought something to the role no one had ever seen in horror before: beauty. He didn't swim like a man pretending to be a monster. He swam like something born in the depths, ancient and effortless. Every slow turn, every reach of those webbed hands felt more like a ballet than a chase. To capture that illusion, Browning performed in Wakulla Springs without air tanks, relying entirely on his lungs. He'd vanish beneath the surface, count in his head, then silently drift into frame, holding still so no bubbles would rise. The camera crew said it was eerie, like filming a dream that could drown you. His movement became the creature's soul, inspiring filmmakers decades later. Even James Cameron studied those scenes when choreographing the fluid motion of aliens and underwater shots in the abyss. Rico Browning didn't just play the monster, he taught it how to move like a legend. Number 7. Florida's Crystal Springs became the Amazon. The movie may claim it takes place deep in the South American jungle, but the real Black Lagoon was pure Florida sunshine. The underwater sequences, those haunting, shimmering shots of the gill man drifting beneath swimmers, were filmed in Wakulla Springs and Silver Springs, two of the clearest bodies of water in the United States. Their transparency gave cinematographers the illusion of an endless underwater world, with sunlight slicing through the depths like liquid glass. It was the perfect disguise for the Amazon. No snakes, no piranhas, just a prehistoric calm that looked too beautiful to be real. Still, filming there was anything but easy. Divers fought unpredictable currents. Browning risked blackouts, holding his breath for minutes at a time, and the camera crew had to hide every air bubble to keep the illusion alive. Locals who visited the set swore the water seemed to come alive during filming, schools of fish darting away as if they knew the monster was coming. It was all movie magic, but under that Florida heat, it felt like the jungle was breathing too. The Amazon may have been fake, but the danger was real. Number 8. The suit was a sauna and a hazard. Every time Ben Chapman put on the Gillman suit, it was like stepping into an oven. Made of thick latex and rubber, the costume trapped heat, sweat, and even the actor's breath inside. On land, under blinding studio lights, Chapman's temperature skyrocketed so fast that production assistants kept him doused with cold water between takes. He couldn't sit, couldn't see properly, and could barely hear. For long stretches, he just stood there, trying not to pass out while waiting for the next cue. The suit didn't just torture Chapman, it endangered everyone around him. During one scene, as he carried Julie Adams through the cave set, he misjudged his footing and accidentally scraped her head against the rock wall. Luckily, she wasn't seriously hurt, but the moment captured just how physically punishing the shoot was. The costume looked like a triumph of design, but for the man inside, it was closer to a slow-cooking coffin. Number 9. Underwater ballet. By a stunt double you never knew existed. That ethereal underwater dance between the creature and Kay Lawrence remains one of the most haunting images in 1950s cinema, but it wasn't Julie Adams gliding through the lagoon. The woman floating above the Gillman's shadow was Ginger Stanley Hallowell, a professional swimmer and stunt performer who doubled for Adams during the underwater scenes. Filmed in Wakulla Springs, the sequence looks like a slow-motion waltz between predator and prey, or maybe between loneliness and curiosity. Every turn of her body, every brush of his claws, told a silent story the dialogue never could. The filming, however, was anything but graceful. Hallowell had to perform blind, wearing a thin white bathing suit in cold spring water with limited visibility. Rico Browning, in full creature costume, approached from below without goggles, relying purely on memory to hit his marks. One misstep, and he risked slamming into her or losing precious air. But somehow, it all clicked. Two performers moving in perfect sync, suspended between danger and poetry. It wasn't choreography. It was instinct, captured in one impossible breath. Pretty wild so far, right? And we're only halfway down the lagoon. If you're loving these hidden Hollywood stories, don't forget to subscribe and hit that new hype button to boost the video so more classic monster fans can find it. All right, back into the water. Number 10. Julie Adams was terrified of the creature, on and off set. Julie Adams may have been the film's heroine, but she wasn't acting when she looked scared. Off camera, she openly admitted that the idea of swimming in Florida's murky waters terrified her. The thought of unseen creatures beneath her feet, snakes, gators, who knows what, was enough to make her freeze. When director Jack Arnold asked her to enter the lagoon, she flat out refused for several takes until stunt double Ginger Stanley stepped in. Even then, Adams couldn't shake the unease of filming beside a rubber-clad monster that looked a little too real in the dim light. During shooting, her fear found its way into the performance. When Ben Chapman or Rico Browning reached for her as the creature, her panic wasn't staged. It was genuine. She later recalled moments where she had to remind herself it was just a movie, even as the water closed around her and those webbed claws brushed her skin. That authenticity gave the film its pulse, real fear wrapped in fantasy. It turns out, the creature didn't need to act to to make Julie scream. Number 11. The creature's look was designed by a woman, then buried by history. The Gillman's design, those wide black eyes, ribbed gills, and reptilian grace, didn't come from a studio committee or a gruff makeup head. It came from Millicent Patrick, a brilliant artist and animator who once worked at Disney before joining Universal's makeup department. Patrick's sketches gave the creature its unmistakable silhouette, blending amphibian anatomy with something eerily human. She even toured to promote the film, posing proudly beside her creation, until her own boss, makeup chief Bud Westmore, decided he didn't like sharing the spotlight. Westmore ordered Patrick's name erased from publicity, taking credit for the creature himself. For decades, history forgot her contribution, and her name vanished from Universal's official records. It wasn't until film historians uncovered internal memos and promotional photos in the early 2000s that Patrick's role was finally recognized. Today, her legacy is celebrated in books, documentaries, and even exhibitions at the Smithsonian, proof that behind every monster, there's often a forgotten genius. Millicent Patrick didn't just design the creature, she gave him a soul. Number 12. The music that defines the monster went uncredited. Every time the creature appears, 3 piercing notes slash through the silence. A sound so primal it feels like fear itself surfacing. That shriek of brass became one of cinema's most recognizable monster themes, right up there with the screech of Psycho's violins. But here's the twist. The composers behind it never got their due. The iconic creature motif wasn't written by one person, but by 3. Herman Stein, Hans J. Salter, and a young Henry Mancini, years before he'd write the Pink Panther theme. Universal's studio system treated music like background wallpaper, recycling cues from film to film. None of the composers were officially credited, even though their combined work gave the Gillman his heartbeat. That sharp musical sting turned a man in a rubber suit into something alive. It warned the audience before they even saw him. Critics later noted how the score almost acted as a character itself, stalking the film's heroes from underwater. The creature might vanish into the depths, but that sound still surfaces every time horror wants to make you flinch. Number 13. A legend was born from a dinner party myth. The seed for Creature from the Black Lagoon didn't come from a studio brainstorming session. It came from a ghost story told over wine and cigarettes. In the early 1940s, producer William Allen attended a dinner party hosted by director Orson Welles. Among the guests was Mexican cinematographer Gabriel Figueroa, who told a strange legend from the Amazon about half-human fish people who lived in hidden lagoons and would kidnap maidens from nearby villages. The image stuck in Allen's mind like a haunting. Years later, while working at Universal, he dug out his old notes labeled The Sea Monster, and the Gillman began to take shape. From that single, drunken tale, grew one of cinema's most enduring creatures. Allen and screenwriter Harry Essex spun the myth into science fiction, replacing curses with evolution and giving the legend a tragic pulse. What began as folklore around a dinner table became a mirror for mankind's obsession with the unknown, that primal fear of what might still be lurking just beneath the surface. It turns out, the creature didn't crawl from the swamp. He crawled out of a story told in the dark. Number 14. It was filmed in true polarized 3D. When Creature from the Black Lagoon hit theaters in 1954, audiences didn't just watch it, they ducked. Universal released the movie using a dual-strip polarized 3D system, projecting 2 reels simultaneously through synchronized lenses. Viewers wore polarized glasses, not the red and blue paper kind, to experience monsters leaping straight from the screen. For many kids, it was their first taste of true cinematic immersion, and their first reason to spill popcorn in terror. The 3D craze was Hollywood's weapon against television, promising spectacle that home screens couldn't deliver. But pulling it off wasn't easy. Cameramen wrestled with bulky rigs the size of refrigerators, and every underwater shot had to be recalibrated for stereoscopic depth. Even Riku Browning's graceful movements were designed to accentuate the illusion, arms extending toward the lens, claws reaching just past the audience's noses. Most 3D films of the era faded into novelty, but Creature from the Black Lagoon proved the format could feel alive. For a moment, fear itself existed in 3 dimensions. Number 15. Guillermo del Toro's dream remake came true. Sort of. As a kid, Guillermo del Toro didn't see the Gillman as a monster. He saw him as misunderstood. To him, the tragedy of Creature from the Black Lagoon wasn't the horror, but the heartbreak. So when he became a filmmaker, Del Toro pitched Universal a bold remake. The same story, but told through the creature's eyes. In his version, the monster and the woman wouldn't just share a connection, they'd fall in love. The studio passed, saying audiences wanted screams, not romance. Del Toro left that dream behind, or so it seemed. Decades later, he built his own Lagoon. The Shape of Water, 2017, carried the same DNA, an amphibious creature, a fragile woman, a love story that defied nature and fear. The difference was, this time, nobody said no. The film swept the Oscars, winning Best Picture, Best Director, and 2 more statues. What Universal had rejected as too strange became the most celebrated fantasy of its time. Del Toro didn't remake the Gilman's story. He finally gave him the ending he deserved. Number 16. The creature's legacy refuses to sink. Decades after his first splash, the Gilman still casts a long shadow over Hollywood. He's appeared in everything from The Monster Squad to The Shape of Water.
The natives in the Amazon worshipped him,
haunting generations of filmmakers who grew up staring into his glassy eyes. Universal tried to resurrect him again and again, through planned remakes in the 1980s, the failed Dark Universe in the 2010s, and countless pitches that never made it past the surface. Yet every time Hollywood tries to drag him back from the depths, they end up rediscovering the same truth. You can't improve on perfection. What made the Gilman timeless wasn't makeup or effects, but emotion. He was the last Universal monster with a heart that beat louder than his roar. He's more than a relic of the 1950s. He's an idea that keeps evolving. The outsider, the misunderstood, the beautiful thing feared for being different. Every generation sees itself in that silhouette emerging from the water. The Black Lagoon might have gone still, but its reflection keeps moving. In art, in horror, and in every story about the unknown that just won't stay buried. Some monsters vanish into legend. This one never sank. He just kept swimming. From a myth whispered at a Hollywood dinner table to a creature that shaped decades of cinema, Creature from the Black Lagoon proved that true horror doesn't always come from shadows or screams. Sometimes it rises slowly from still water. Beneath the rubber suit, behind the fog machines, and under those shimmering springs, there was artistry, danger, and heart. The film wasn't just another monster flick. It was a story about beauty, fear, and everything that exists between them. Every generation since has tried to bring the Gilman back, but no one has truly surpassed him. Maybe because he's more than a monster. He's a mirror, reflecting our fascination with the unknown and our fear of what it might say about us. The Lagoon may be quiet now, but the ripples he left still reach every corner of pop culture. So tell me, which fact pulled you deepest into the Lagoon? And if you enjoyed this dive into classic horror, subscribe for more untold Hollywood stories, and don't forget to hype the video so more monster fans can find their way into the Black Lagoon. Our next stop, science fiction with jetpacks and ambition. Buckle up, it's cosmic opera time. This Island Earth.
Now please move back. HM, I must ask you to have faith in our ultimate aims. I must also ask you to refrain from meeting with any of your co-workers again, except in our usual channels.
Anywhere you want it.
What if I told you one of the most ambitious sci-fi films of the 1950s was Universal's answer to Star Wars, decades before Star Wars even existed? This Island Earth wasn't just another monster movie. It was a full-blown space opera filmed in dazzling Technicolor where humanity faced the unknown across the stars. But behind the glowing saucers and futuristic lab coats was chaos, rewrites, ego clashes, and a mutant costume that nearly ruined it all. These are 16 facts about This Island Earth, the film that tried to bring prestige to pulp and paid the price for dreaming too big. Number 1. The Star Wars of the 1950s. Before Luke ever picked up a lightsaber, Universal tried to build its own galaxy far, far away. This Island Earth was billed as the Star Wars of its day, a bold, colorful space epic at a time when most sci-fi films were cheap black and white monster flicks. Universal poured money into it like never before, hoping to prove it could outshine Paramount and Warner Brothers with something grander than radioactive bugs or lizard men. Every frame was designed to look expensive. Glowing alien labs, sleek saucers, and Technicolor skies, this was spectacle on a new level. It cost around $800,000 to make, a fortune for 1955, making it the most lavish sci-fi film of its time. Audiences had never seen anything like it. Critics called it bizarre and beautiful, and for a moment, it looked like Universal had launched a new age of science fiction. But behind that shimmering success, the real drama was just beginning. Number 2, based on a serious novel. Long before it hit the big screen, This Island Earth began as a quiet little story buried in the pages of a pulp magazine. Writer Raymond F. Jones published it in Thrilling Wonder Stories in 1952, a tale that dared to treat science fiction with brains instead of just thrills. His novel tackled morality, politics, and philosophy, at a time when most sci-fi writers were still inventing giant ants and radioactive blobs. When Universal bought the rights, they didn't just buy another alien invasion story. They bought an idea. One that asked what it really means to communicate across galaxies, and whether intelligence alone could save a dying world. That depth was rare in 1950s cinema, and it gave the studio a foundation far more thoughtful than the creature features it was known for. But adapting that kind of story for Hollywood wasn't easy, because once the suits got involved, science and philosophy quickly gave way to deadlines, rewrites, and studio politics.
I won't ask you to condone what we've done. All I ask is that when you understand the plight of my people, you try to have more sympathy for our deeds.
Number 3. The director's double deal. Director Joseph Newman didn't just want to film this island Earth, he wanted to control it. After leaving 20th Century Fox in 1953, Newman discovered Raymond F. Jones's novel and saw its potential. So, he did something bold. He bought the rights himself, hired a writer to adapt it, and then took the finished package to Universal. His deal came with one condition. If the studio wanted the story, they had to buy his script and hire him to direct. It was an unusual power move in the 1950s, especially from a filmmaker better known for small westerns and noir thrillers. But it worked. Universal, desperate for a prestige sci-fi project, accepted. Newman suddenly went from pitching movies to commanding one of the most expensive science fiction films of its decade. He had won the battle to direct, but he'd soon find out that in Hollywood, keeping control of your own creation is a war that never really ends. Number 4. The script that wasn't sci-fi enough. When Universal read the first version of This Island Earth, they weren't impressed. Producer William Allen, who had helped shape Creature from the Black Lagoon, said, "The story felt cold and lacked a moral center." His solution? Bring in Franklin Cohen, a writer known for detective mysteries, not science fiction. Cohen had never written about aliens or space travel before, yet he was tasked with rewriting the entire screenplay from scratch, infusing it with heart, humanity, and a sense of purpose. The result shifted the film's tone from hard science to something more emotional, a story about understanding between species rather than just survival. It was a gamble that paid off. Cohen's rewrite gave the movie its philosophical edge, but also marked the first time Newman realized he was no longer the only one steering the ship. Number 5. Rex Reason's name battle. Before filming began, Universal tried to rebrand its new leading man. Actor Rex Reason was told he'd have to use a stage name, Bart Roberts, because the studio thought his real name sounded too fake to be believable. Ironically, it was his real name that sounded more like a Hollywood invention. Reason refused to play along. He demanded that his own name appear on the credits, even if it meant risking his first major lead role. It was a gutsy move for a relatively unknown actor in the 1950s, especially at a studio not known for giving its talent much say. In the end, he won. Rex Reason stayed on the poster, and the name became one of the most memorable in 1950s sci-fi. It was the first of many power struggles behind the scenes, a reminder that even in a movie about aliens, the real battles were fought on Earth. Number 6. Faith Domergue's bruising shoot. For actress Faith Domergue, This Island Earth was supposed to be her big comeback, but it turned into a physical ordeal. During the film's demanding action scenes, she was tossed, dunked, and bruised from head to toe. In one sequence, she had to wrestle with the mutant creature. By the time shooting wrapped, she later said she was black and blue from shoulder to feet. Domergue had been discovered years earlier by Howard Hughes, who promised her stardom, but this role proved just how tough she really was. There were no stunt doubles, no safety warm-ups, just long takes and a ticking studio clock. Her pain paid off. Despite the grueling conditions, her performance helped sell the illusion that This Island Earth was something bigger than its rubber monsters, a sci-fi film with real human grit behind the spectacle.
You were awful sissy about that icy water. Now, Ruth, don't tell me you've forgotten.
Dr. Meacham, all I can say is I'm deeply flattered, maybe a little envious of the girl you've mistaken me for.
Number 7. A co-star who never broke character. Not everyone on set shared the same warmth. Actress Faith Domergue later said her co-star, Jeff Morrow, who played the alien Exeter, was a hard man to get friendly with. He rarely joked, barely spoke off camera, and kept to himself between takes. The reason? Morrow stayed in character even when the cameras weren't rolling. He believed Exeter wasn't just an alien. He was a symbol of understanding between worlds. To capture that quiet dignity, Morrow isolated himself from the rest of the cast, speaking in calm, measured tones and observing rather than socializing. It gave his performance a strange, haunting quality that audiences noticed, but it also made life on set feel like walking on eggshells. For Domergue, it was less like acting with a colleague and more like sharing scenes with a visitor from another planet. Pretty wild so far, right? And we're only halfway through. From bruised actors to secret rewrites, This Island Earth was already turning into one of Hollywood's strangest productions. But the chaos was far from over, because next came the mutants' wardrobe malfunction, a real UFO sighting, and a studio so embarrassed they almost disowned their own film. Let's keep going. Number 8. the $800,000 gamble. Universal wasn't known for big budgets in the 1950s. Their bread and butter was black and white monster flicks that could be shot fast and cheap. But when This Island Earth came along, the studio decided to bet big. Almost $800,000, an enormous sum for a sci-fi film at the time. The money went everywhere. Elaborate sets, shimmering Technicolor film stock, miniature effects, and custom-built alien props. Even the laboratory equipment was designed to glow under colored light filters to make it look futuristic. The studio wanted audiences to feel they were seeing something truly out of this world. It was a high-stakes move that briefly paid off. The film became one of Universal's biggest hits of 1955. But it also taught the studio a brutal lesson. Prestige sci-fi was expensive, and monster movies were cheaper. After This Island Earth, Universal didn't gamble that big again for years.
Metaluna's atmospheric pressure is like that in your greatest oceans. If we entered Metaluna's orbit without conversion, we'd be crushed to death.
Then in going from Metaluna to Earth, the tissues of our bodies would dwindle. We'd disintegrate completely.
Correct, Meacham.
Number 9. The Trousered Monster. One of the strangest details in This Island Earth isn't in the script, it's in the costume. The mutant creature, designed to terrify audiences, ended up wearing a pair of trousers. Originally, the alien's legs were meant to match its insect-like upper body, but the effects team couldn't get them to move properly. The latex kept tearing, and the clock was ticking. With the studio breathing down their necks, the crew made a desperate fix. They dressed the mutant from the waist down in pants to hide the problem. Movie posters still showed the full, terrifying creature as it was meant to be seen. But on screen, the alien looked like it had raided a department store. Ironically, the design flaw became part of the film's cult charm. Today, that trousered mutant is one of the most recognizable and unintentionally funny icons of 1950s science fiction. Number 10. The real UFO inspiration. That sleek flying saucer in This Island Earth wasn't born from imagination. It was modeled after one of the most famous real UFO sightings in history. In 1950, a farmer named Paul Trent photographed a mysterious disc hovering over his farm in McMinnville, Oregon. The two photos became legendary, sparking national headlines and decades of debate. Universal's effects team used those very images as reference for the Metaluna spacecraft, carefully shaping its curved hull and glowing lights to match the photos. It wasn't a coincidence. They wanted audiences to subconsciously connect the film's fiction with reports they'd seen in newspapers. The result was eerie. The ship felt oddly familiar, as if it could have been spotted in the night sky for real. To this day, UFO researchers still call the McMinnville photos some of the best evidence ever captured, blurring the line between cinematic fantasy and earthly mystery. Number 11. The Earth that became a logo. When you see the spinning globe at the start of an old Universal movie, you might actually be looking at a leftover prop from This Island Earth. The studio's effects team built a miniature Earth for the film's space sequences, a detailed model lit with swirling clouds and faint atmospheric glow. After production wrapped, Universal didn't toss it out. They repurposed the same miniature in their official studio logo, the one audiences saw before every film from the 1950s through the 1980s. It was their way of getting extra mileage out of an expensive prop while giving the brand a futuristic look. So every time a Universal movie opened with that majestic spinning planet, it wasn't just a symbol. It was a quiet echo of This Island Earth, the film that literally put their logo in orbit.
Earth. It's being left far behind.
Number 12. Two directors, one vision. Halfway through production, Universal started to panic. Early test footage from director Joseph Newman wasn't living up to expectations. Too slow, too talky, not enough cosmic energy. So, behind the scenes, the studio quietly called in another filmmaker, Jack Arnold, the man behind Creature from the Black Lagoon and It Came from Outer Space. Arnold stepped in to reshoot key scenes, especially those set on the alien planet Metaluna. His knack for tension and atmosphere gave the movie the visual punch Universal wanted, but it also meant two very different directing styles collided in one film. Newman's moody, cerebral tone mixed with Arnold's pulpy energy created something unintentionally unique. A film that felt both grand and strange, intelligent and campy. Exactly the balance that would later make This Island Earth a cult classic. Number 13. The Composer Trio. When it came time to score This Island Earth, Universal wanted music that felt larger than life, something that could make audiences believe they were drifting between galaxies. Instead of hiring one composer, the studio brought in three: Henry Mancini, Hans J. Salter, and Herman Stein, the same powerhouse team that had created the unforgettable sound of Creature from the Black Lagoon. Together, they built a sonic world out of eerie strings, booming brass, and experimental electronic tones that were cutting edge for the 1950s. Mancini, who would later write the Pink Panther theme, helped weave elegance into the chaos, while Salter and Stein handled the terror and tension. The result was one of the most haunting sci-fi soundtracks of its era. a mix of beauty and dread that made This Island Earth feel less like a B-movie and more like an interstellar opera. Number 14, embarrassed at their own premiere. When This Island Earth premiered in 1955, the audience gasped, but not always for the right reasons. During the scenes featuring the mutant creature, stars Rex Reason and Jeff Morrow reportedly cringed in their seats. The costume, meant to be terrifying, looked clumsy and oddly human from the waist down, thanks to those last-minute trousers. Both actors later admitted they were so embarrassed by the mutant's appearance that they nearly walked out of the theater. What was supposed to be Universal's proudest sci-fi achievement suddenly felt like a punchline, yet over time, the same creature that mortified its own cast became iconic. The mutant's bulging brain and buggy eyes turned into a cult symbol, proof that sometimes the most memorable moments in cinema are born from accidents, not perfection.
Stand back!
Number 15, the sequel that never left the ground. After This Island Earth became one of Universal's biggest hits of 1955, the studio immediately started planning a sequel. The script was titled Aliens in the Skies, written by screenwriter Franklin Cohen and producer William Alland, with plans to reunite Rex Reason and Faith Demergue for another Technicolor adventure. It was even set to be filmed in CinemaScope, a widescreen format that would have made the sequel look bigger and grander than the original. For a brief moment, the project was in pre-production. Sets were being designed and the cast was ready to return. But when Universal's executives reviewed the proposed budget, they froze. The film was simply too expensive, and the sci-fi boom was already cooling off. So, before a single frame was shot, Aliens in the Skies was scrapped, leaving This Island Earth forever standing alone as Universal's one great attempt at an epic space opera. Number 16, a legacy hidden in the stars. Even after Universal abandoned big-budget sci-fi, This Island Earth refused to fade away. It quietly echoed through pop culture for decades, referenced in comics, video games, and even television. One of the clearest nods came in Star Trek's 1969 episode All Our Yesterdays, when Captain Kirk tells a prosecutor he comes from an island called Earth. Fans instantly recognized it as a clever wink to Universal's space classic. The film also inspired homages in later works, from Joe Dante's Explorers to Mystery Science Theater 3000, the movie, where it was lovingly roasted as both ridiculous and revolutionary. For a movie once dismissed as too strange and too serious, This Island Earth ended up doing exactly what its creators hoped. It reached across generations, proving that even imperfect dreams can leave a permanent mark in the stars. For a film that began as a gamble, This Island Earth became something more, a strange, glowing time capsule of 1950s ambition. It dared to dream bigger than monsters in rubber suits, reaching for the stars when everyone else was still afraid to leave Earth. Behind its shimmering colors and awkward costumes was a story about vision, of artists who wanted to make science fiction feel epic, human, and hopeful. And even if it stumbled along the way, it opened the door for everything that came after. So, which fact surprised you the most? Let me know in the comments, and remember, even the wildest ideas can change the shape of cinema forever. What happens when mankind reaches paradise and finds its own demons waiting? The future was never so dangerous. Forbidden Planet.
Where have you been? I've beamed and beamed.
Sorry, miss. I was giving myself an oil job.
What if I told you one of the most important science fiction movies ever made nearly collapsed under its own ambition? Forbidden Planet, the 1956 classic that changed the way Hollywood thought about science fiction, wasn't just about robots, monsters, and distant galaxies. Behind the scenes, it was a storm of censorship battles, wild production choices, drunken actors, and innovations that no one believed could work. And here's the kicker. Behind the futuristic sets and groundbreaking effects, the production was just as wild as what ended up on screen. These are 14 weird facts about Forbidden Planet, and some are so unbelievable you'll wonder how this film even survived production. From bands over miniskirts to a drunk robot operator, from experimental music to failed remakes, this is the untold story of the sci-fi movie that changed everything. Number 1. Banned in Spain. Of all the controversies, the strangest one came from Spain. The movie wasn't banned for violence, politics, or its strange electronic sounds. No, it was banned because Anne Francis wore miniskirts. Her futuristic dresses were too short for the strict standards of Spain's Franco-era censors, who saw them as scandalous. The movie was pulled entirely and couldn't be shown for 11 years. It wasn't until 1967 that Spaniards finally saw Forbidden Planet, long after the miniskirt had become an international fashion symbol. By then, what once caused outrage looked tame compared to the cultural revolution sweeping Europe. It's one of the rare cases where a sci-fi classic was censored not for aliens or monsters, but for fashion. Number 2. The Drunk Robot Operator. Robbie the Robot may have looked mechanical, but inside was a stuntman named Frankie Darrow, tasked with bringing him to life. The suit was heavy, cramped, and expensive, costing MGM over $100,000 to build. But Darrow had a problem. He enjoyed his martinis. During one lunch break, he had 5 too many, climbed back into the massive suit, and tried to perform. The result? Robbie wobbled, stumbled, and eventually toppled over, nearly wrecking one of the most expensive props in Hollywood history. The crew was horrified. Imagine losing the centerpiece of your movie to a drunken fall. Darrow was quickly fired and replaced, but the story lived on. Every time Robbie appeared on screen after that, the cast and crew knew they'd narrowly avoided disaster. Number 3. Robbie the Robot's rise to fame. Robbie wasn't just a prop, he was a star. MGM spent a fortune on his design, and it paid off. His futuristic look captured the imagination of audiences, and he quickly became one of the most famous robots in film history. After Forbidden Planet, Robbie appeared in The Invisible Boy and became a frequent guest on TV. He showed up in The Twilight Zone, Lost in Space, Columbo, Wonder Woman, Mork and Mindy, and even in comedies like The Love Boat. His cameos became a running joke in Hollywood. If you wanted to wink at classic sci-fi, you brought in Robbie. Even decades later, he popped up in Gremlins and The Big Bang Theory. In 2017, the original prop sold at auction for $5.3 million, making him the most expensive movie prop ever sold. Not bad for a robot who once fell flat on his face thanks to a drunk operator. Number 4. The animated monster from the id. Monsters of the 1950s usually meant rubber suits and rubber scares, but Forbidden Planet gave audiences something new. The monster from the id, a terrifying creature born from Dr. Morbius's subconscious. Instead of building another suit, MGM hired Disney animator Joshua Meador to bring the monster to life through hand-drawn animation. The glowing, spectral beast was unlike anything moviegoers had seen. Some theaters even cut the monster out of screenings, worried it would traumatize children. And it wasn't just scary, it was symbolic. Animators even hinted at Morbius's connection by giving the beast subtle human traits, like the faint outline of a goatee. For audiences used to clumsy rubber aliens, this monster was a psychological gut punch, proving sci-fi could explore the darker corners of the human mind. Number 5. The electronic score first. If the monster terrified audiences visually, the score got inside their heads. Forbidden Planet was the first movie to feature an entirely electronic soundtrack. Composers Bebe and Louis Barron created strange, pulsing tones that felt alien, giving the film a sound unlike anything before it. But the musicians' union hated it. They refused to recognize the Barons' work as music, forcing MGM to credit it as electronic tonalities. The Barons didn't care. They had made history. Their experimental sounds influenced everything from 2001: A Space Odyssey to modern synth scores. At a time when audiences were used to swelling orchestras, Forbidden Planet dropped them into a world that sounded just as alien as it looked. Pretty wild so far, right? And we're only halfway through. If you thought a robot operator getting drunk and crashing in a $100,000 costume was insane, stick around, because what's coming next is even crazier. We'll get into how Forbidden Planet reused Wizard of Oz sets to build alien worlds, the shocking early career of Leslie Nielsen, and the Shakespearean play that secretly inspired the whole movie. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's ahead. Number 6. Filmed on MGM sets. The alien landscapes of Forbidden Planet were impressive for the time, but here's the secret. They were built on the same sound stages MGM had once used for The Wizard of Oz. Those colorful, fantastical sets became the foundation for an entirely new world. The production was so ambitious that the set designer let the budget quietly spiral out of control, figuring the results would be worth it. By the time MGM noticed, it was too late, but the gamble worked. Forbidden Planet became the first film set entirely on another planet, something unheard of in the 1950s. The film's look set the tone for the next generation of sci-fi, from Star Trek's sleek starships to Star Wars' sprawling alien landscapes. Number 7. Young Leslie Nielsen. When audiences think of Leslie Nielsen today, they picture a deadpan comedy genius. But long before Airplane and The Naked Gun, Nielsen was Hollywood's idea of a serious leading man. In Forbidden Planet, he was only 29 years old, playing Commander John J. Adams, the brave, no-nonsense leader of the expedition. At the time, Nielsen was under contract with MGM, and the studio tapped him as their rising star. He appeared in war films, thrillers, and dramas, but it was Forbidden Planet that gave him one of his earliest big roles. Watching him in the film today is almost surreal. Fans who grew up laughing at his comedy see him as a stone-faced space hero. It's proof that even Hollywood's funniest stars sometimes start out deadly serious. Number 8. Origin and inspiration. The roots of Forbidden Planet go back to Shakespeare. Writers Irving Bloch and Alan Adler drew heavy inspiration from The Tempest, the story of a powerful man living in isolation with his daughter and battling monsters of his own making. Sound familiar? Originally, the script was called Fatal Planet and was set in the year 1976 on Mercury. In that version, the monster wasn't psychological, but a literal alien. But MGM brought in writer Cyril Hume, who transformed the story into something deeper. The setting moved to a distant world, the characters shifted, and the monster became a manifestation of the mind itself. Shakespeare's DNA remained, but in a way audiences had never seen. The Tempest rewritten as a space-age cautionary tale. Number 9. Title change for marketing. Names matter in Hollywood, and Forbidden Planet wasn't always called that. The original title, Fatal Planet, sounded grim, almost like a warning. MGM executives feared it would turn audiences away, so they changed one word, and everything shifted. Forbidden promised danger, mystery, and allure. It was a title designed to spark curiosity. In an era crowded with B-movies like It Came from Outer Space and The Thing from Another World, Forbidden Planet stood out. The new name gave the film an edge of intrigue, and it worked. People showed up wanting to know what secrets the Forbidden World held, proving how much power a single word can have at the box office. Number 10. Remake struggles. With all its influence, you'd think Forbidden Planet would have been remade by now. Studios have tried, again and again. Since the 2000s, names like James Cameron and Joel Silver have been attached. New Line, DreamWorks, and Warner Brothers have all taken shots at developing a modern version, and every single attempt has failed. Even in the 2020s, reports of a remake resurface now and then, but nothing gets off the ground. Maybe the movie is cursed, or maybe it's something simpler. The original can't be topped. Forbidden Planet already blended Shakespearean drama, sci-fi spectacle, and groundbreaking effects in a way that feels untouchable. For once, Hollywood's obsession with remakes keeps hitting a wall, because this is one classic that doesn't need redoing. The electronics lab was a wiring beast. You'd think the special effects of a 1956 sci-fi would be modest, but Forbidden Planet went all in. The film's sprawling electronics lab wasn't just a set piece, it was an engineering project in itself. It used over 50,000 feet of wiring, 2,500 feet of neon tubing, and 1,200 square yards of plexiglass to bring its futuristic look to life. Buzzing and sparking with energy, MGM brought in a team of 15 electricians who worked a single, giant control panel with 110 separate switches. Every light flicker and pulse on screen was manually triggered. For audiences in 1956, this wasn't just a background. It was a visual statement that science fiction had grown up. Number 12. Robbie's design started in the laundry room. Robbie the robot's design looks futuristic even today, but his roots are surprisingly humble. Designer Robert Kinoshita had previously worked on washing machines, and he borrowed ideas from that world when building Robbie. His chest and legs were shaped to echo the rounded forms of washer tubs, giving the robot a sturdy industrial look. That blend of domestic appliance and sci-fi imagination made Robbie feel both believable and otherworldly. He wasn't just a shiny toy robot, he looked like a working machine, one that could exist in the real world. It's part of why audiences connected with him so strongly, and why his design remains iconic nearly 70 years later. Fact 13. Most ambitious camera work ever. Forbidden Planet wasn't just bold in design, it was a logistical beast behind the lens. George Folsey, the cinematographer, revealed that more than 2 years of technical planning went into pre-production. Just to figure out how to shoot the film, they had to light vast, surreal sets covering 4 of MGM's largest sound stages with painted cycloramas and impossible color gradients for CinemaScope and Eastman Color. Every scene was a visual puzzle, so complex that Folsey praised his crew for their precise coordination in pulling off the lighting and photographic effects. Hidden fact 14. Starship C-57D inspired Star Trek's USS Enterprise. The sleek flying saucer starship in Forbidden Planet, designated the United Planets cruiser C-57D, didn't just look cool. It went on to inspire future sci-fi icons. Its lens-shaped design and upper dome later influenced the saucer section of Star Trek's USS Enterprise. Even Lost in Space's Jupiter 2 took visual cues from the C-57D. So, the design legacy of Forbidden Planet didn't end on Altair 4. It helped shape the look of space travel in the decades that followed. Nearly 70 years later, Forbidden Planet still feels ahead of its time. It wasn't just another space adventure, it was a bold experiment that pushed every boundary Hollywood had. From Robbie the Robot's $1 million legacy to a soundtrack that redefined movie music. From Shakespearean roots to censorship battles, the film's story is as fascinating as the movie itself. Its influence is impossible to ignore. Without it, we might not have Star Trek 2001, A Space Odyssey, or even Star Wars in the form we know them today. It proved that sci-fi could be smart, stylish, and thought-provoking, not just cheap thrills with rubber suits. And maybe that's why every remake attempt has failed. The original already nailed it. Forbidden Planet remains one of the rare movies that feels timeless. Its visuals, its ambition, and its strange behind-the-scenes stories still capture imaginations. Nearly 7 decades later, it's not just a film. It's a reminder that when sci-fi dares to dream bigger, it can change cinema forever. So, which fact blew your mind the most? Leave a comment and let us know, and of course, subscribe if you like hidden facts of classic Hollywood. Now, we descend into the cold, a remote Arctic base, a creature in the ice, and the movie that inspired generations of filmmakers, The Thing from Another World.
Look there. Pat, the compass is in a spin.
Geiger's up to the top.
Yeah, that's it, all right.
What if I told you one of the most terrifying alien movies of all time almost looked completely different? Long before John Carpenter's slimy body horror classic, there was the 1951 original The Thing from Another World, a movie born in the shadow of the Cold War, stitched together by feuding filmmakers and starring a monster that was never supposed to look the way you remember it. Behind the frozen landscapes and burning title letters, there were hidden battles, dangerous stunts, and secrets so wild they could have killed the cast. Some call it just another monster flick, but the truth? It was a Cold War nightmare disguised as science fiction, and the stories behind the camera are just as chilling as what burst out of the ice. These are 16 hidden facts about The Thing from Another World. Number 1. The director who maybe didn't direct. On paper, The Thing from Another World was directed by Christian Nyby. He was a respected film editor trying to break into directing, and this movie was supposed to be his big shot. His name is right there in the credits, etched into history. But talk to the actors who were on set, and they'll tell you a different story. Many swore that the real puppet master was legendary filmmaker Howard Hawks. Hawks wasn't just the producer, he was constantly on set, blocking shots, rewriting dialogue, even coaching performances. To some, it looked less like guidance and more like Hawks was directing the whole film without taking credit. Why would he do that? Some believed Hawks didn't want his prestigious name tied to a monster movie. Others say he was simply testing Nyby. Either way, the question still lingers. Who really directed this film?
Captain Henry! What's the matter, Corporal? Dr. Chapman. Where's the captain? I've got to tell him. I've got to tell him that thing's alive. I saw it, sir. Chase me. That thing's alive.
Number 2. The Shapeshifter That Never Was. The original novella Who Goes There gave birth to the most terrifying idea of all, a creature that could shapeshift into anyone it touched. Imagine the paranoia. Your best friend, your commanding officer, even the person next to you might not be human anymore. That was supposed to be the heart of the movie. But when production began, the studio slammed into a wall called budget. Pulling off shape-changing effects in 1951 would have required expensive makeup, camera tricks, and multiple elaborate suits. Instead, the filmmakers scrapped the idea, simplifying the alien into a single, hulking figure. It was easier to shoot, but a huge departure from the source. It may not have copied faces, but it still terrified audiences. Sometimes one big monster is scarier than a hidden one.
Ferguson has a worry.
This is no joke.
What if he can read our minds?
He's gonna be real mad when he gets to me.
Number 3. James Arness buried under the monster suit. Before he became Marshall Dillon on Gunsmoke, James Arness had one of the strangest early roles in Hollywood, playing the alien in The Thing from Another World. At over 6 feet 7, he had the size producers wanted, towering over the rest of the cast. But the role was brutal. The makeup and prosthetics took hours to apply, with layers of latex, padding, and a headpiece that restricted breathing. Arness hated the suit, complaining he felt like he was suffocating inside it. Some scenes required him to crash through doors and take fire blasts, all while barely able to see. Years later, Arness admitted he was embarrassed by the role. He even skipped the premiere, worried people would laugh at him. Little did he know that under all that makeup, he was creating a sci-fi icon.
I'm not your enemy. I'm a scientist. I'm a scientist who's trying.
Number 4. The monster's face got a last-minute makeover. The alien suit was originally designed by makeup artist Lee Greenway, who spent months creating something unique. Early sketches leaned toward a more alien look, less human, more insect-like, a design that would have been closer to the novella's vision. But when producers saw the results, they panicked. They thought audiences wouldn't accept something too strange. So at the last minute, they demanded changes. Greenway was ordered to simplify the design, giving the creature a more human-like head with squared-off Frankenstein features. That compromise frustrated the crew, but it stuck. The alien ended up looking more like a classic movie monster than an unearthly terror. Number 5. The fire stunt that nearly went wrong. One of the most shocking moments in the movie comes when the alien bursts into the crew's quarters and is set on fire. For 1951, this wasn't just daring, it was one of the most dangerous fire stunts ever attempted. The scene was shot MOS, meaning without sound, so the crew could focus entirely on safety. Multiple stuntmen were hidden in protective suits, and real kerosene was ignited to engulf the alien. The flames burned so hot that actors off-camera felt the heat blister their skin. It worked. The sequence was terrifyingly real, and it nearly ended in disaster, which made it unforgettable.
1.8. Compass spikes. 1.9. The needles hit the top.
Number 6. Freezing the set for real. To sell the Arctic atmosphere, the crew didn't just rely on fake snow, they actually refrigerated the sound stages, dropping temperatures close to freezing so actors' breath would fog up on camera. The cast bundled up in real heavy parkas, and scenes were shot in visible cold. It was uncomfortable, but it gave the movie a sense of authenticity that special effects alone couldn't capture. Even the camera lenses sometimes frosted over between takes. The chill wasn't fake. The Arctic was alive on set.
Wait a minute, Scotty. You won't need any boots. When it comes, you go back with the others. You don't belong out here.
I didn't belong at Alamein or Bougainville or Okinawa. I was just kibitzing. And I also write a very good obituary to you. Just ignore me, please.
Captain Henry.
Go ahead.
Number 7. The credits that hid the stars. Most films of the era opened by proudly announcing the names of the cast and crew. But The Thing from Another World did something bold. The opening title simply burned through the screen with those iconic letters, and then the movie launched straight into the story. No names, no billing, no starring so-and-so. The actors went uncredited until the very end of the film. A strange move that added to the atmosphere of mystery and unease. It felt less like Hollywood glamour and more like a classified military file. That choice made the film feel bigger than its cast, as if the story itself was the star. Pretty wild so far, right? And we're only halfway through. Think about it. We've had a mystery director, a suffocating monster suit, and fire stunts that nearly went up in smoke. But trust me, the best is still buried under the ice. Because the deeper you dig into this movie, the stranger it gets. From scenes that were changed in the editing room to explosions so strong they cracked real windows, the chaos behind this film was almost scarier than the alien itself. Number 8. Editing added a missing victim. Not everything terrifying on screen was in the original script. During editing, the team realized the alien's threat didn't feel big enough. Audiences needed to see just how it could wipe people out. So the editor spliced in an extra moment showing a crew member's disappearance, hinting the alien had assimilated him. It was a clever trick, built almost entirely from scraps of unused footage and reaction shots. It was subtle, but it changed the tone. Suddenly, the alien felt unstoppable even when you didn't see it. Number 9. A loose adaptation of the novella. The movie is technically based on John W. Campbell's novella Who Goes There? But if you've read the story, you know the film barely resembles it. The book was all about paranoia, identity, and a monster that could imitate anyone. The film stripped most of that away, focusing instead on a straightforward alien threat. The Cold War themes of science versus the military were added in, giving it a very different flavor from Campbell's original vision. It wasn't faithful, but it gave audiences a creature feature that still packed a punch. Number 10. A monster made of plants. Most 1950s movie aliens were little green men or bug-eyed invaders. But The Thing from Another World went in a different direction. The alien wasn't even animal at all. It was designed as a plant-based life form. According to the script, it fed on blood like a vampire but grew like a vegetable, complete with cells that mimicked chlorophyll. This was a radical choice at the time. A walking, blood-drinking vegetable blurred the line between science experiment and nightmare. It also gave the film a strange allegorical edge. Science run wild, nature turned hostile, humanity under siege from something we thought we understood. A monster made of plants? Only in the 50s could that idea sprout terror.
Ready, Bob? No, but go ahead and open it.
Number 11. The cut sabotage scene. Early drafts included a sequence where the Thing directly sabotaged the outpost's heating system and oil lines. The idea was to show the creature not just as a brute, but as an intelligent invader, slowly turning the base into a death trap. But when the footage was cut together, the pacing dragged. The producers scrapped the scene, leaving only hints that the alien was responsible for the failing systems. In the final movie, the sabotage is more implied than seen, forcing the audience to fill in the blanks. Sometimes what you don't show makes the monster feel even smarter. Number 12. Science versus the military. At its core, the movie isn't just about a monster. It's about a clash of ideologies. Dr. Carrington, the head scientist, believes the alien should be studied, even protected, no matter how many people it kills. To him, knowledge is worth any sacrifice. On the other side, the Air Force crew sees the Thing as a threat that must be destroyed at all costs. This tug of war between intellectual curiosity and military pragmatism reflected real Cold War fears, the dangers of unchecked science versus the need for defense. It wasn't just sci-fi, it was a warning dressed as entertainment. Number 13. Cracking the ice with real explosives. When the crew uncovers the flying saucer buried in ice, the filmmakers wanted the reveal to feel massive. To get it, they used actual explosive charges under the set, blasting chunks of ice and snow sky high. The force was so strong, it rattled the studio walls and even cracked real windows nearby. For a movie made on a modest budget, it was a risky stunt that pushed safety to the edge, and it paid off with one of the most iconic images in 50s sci-fi. The Arctic wasn't fake that day. They blew it up for real. Number 14. Cornflakes and movie magic. Special effects in the early 50s didn't have the luxury of computers or green screens. To pull off the look of ice and debris when the alien craft is uncovered, the crew turned to low-tech genius. They blasted cornflakes and flour into the air. Under the harsh studio lights, it looked like ice shards and snow exploding across the screen. The trick worked so well that most audiences never suspected it was breakfast cereal raining down on the actors. Combined with careful matte work, the sequence gave the illusion of a massive frozen wasteland breaking apart. Sometimes Hollywood history is just smoke, mirrors, and cereal. Number 15. Hiding the monster in the shadows. The alien suit looked imposing, but up close it wasn't exactly terrifying. The filmmakers knew this, so they made a clever choice. Keep the creature hidden as much as possible. Most of its appearances are quick flashes, silhouettes, or scenes where it bursts in and out of the frame. By showing less, they created more suspense. Viewers were left to imagine the details, and what you don't see is often scarier than what you do. The shadows did the work that makeup couldn't. In the end, the monster's mystery became its biggest weapon. Number 16. The birth of a sci-fi legacy. When it hit theaters in 1951, The Thing from Another World didn't just scare audiences. It lit the fuse for a whole decade of creature features. The burning title sequence, the isolated Arctic setting, the idea of an alien menace, all became blueprints for later sci-fi and horror films. Its influence stretched far beyond the 50s. John Carpenter openly paid tribute with his 1982 remake, and countless directors have borrowed its paranoia, atmosphere, and man versus the unknown theme. What started as a modest black and white thriller ended up shaping an entire genre. The monster may have been defeated, but its shadow still looms over science fiction today. The Thing from Another World may look like a simple 50s monster flick on the surface, but behind the scenes, it was anything but simple. Hidden directors, dangerous stunts, bizarre creative choices, and a legacy that outgrew its own monster suit. This film froze its place in history. What makes it unforgettable isn't just the alien crashing through doors, but the way it captured a Cold War fear that the enemy could come from anywhere, even outer space. That paranoia, that sense of dread, still echoes in modern horror. 70 years later, the warning at the end still feels chilling.
Watch the skies, everywhere.
So, which fact shocked you the most? Let me know in the comments. And if you thought this was wild, just wait until you see the secrets behind the next one last nightmare before the credits roll. No aliens, no creatures, just the Earth itself, turning against us. The Monolith Monsters. What if the deadliest invasion in history didn't come from creatures, but from rocks? In 1957, the Monolith Monsters turned the desert into a nightmare, where every drop of rain could awaken a crystal army. There were no monsters to shoot, no aliens to reason with, just an unstoppable force that grew taller every hour. It's one of Universal's strangest sci-fi experiments, born from recycled film reels, uncredited geniuses, and Cold War paranoia that seeped into every scene. These are 16 weird facts about the Monolith Monsters, the film that made geology terrifying. Number 1. Jack Arnold was almost the director. Before the Monolith Monsters petrified audiences, it was meant to be another Jack Arnold classic. Universal had originally tapped the genius behind Creature from the Black Lagoon, and It Came from Outer Space to both produce and direct the film. Under its early working title, Monolith, Arnold had already mastered the art of turning science into spectacle, and this story of killer crystals was right up his alley. But fate had other plans. Arnold was pulled away to work on The Tattered Dress, leaving the project to John Sherwood, a man best known as a second-unit director. It was a massive leap for Sherwood, and tragically, it would also be his last film. He passed away shortly after its release, giving the Monolith Monsters an eerie sense of finality, both on-screen and off. A sci-fi legend almost made it, but destiny handed it to a director who'd never get to make another. Number 2. A hidden Henry Mancini connection. If you thought the movie's eerie opening theme sounded suspiciously elegant for a low-budget B-movie, you'd be right. The score credited to Irving Gertz quietly borrowed from Universal's in-house music library, where an uncredited Henry Mancini was just cutting his teeth. A few of his early compositions, along with cues from Herman Stein, were stitched into the Monolith Monsters to save time and money. That haunting 21-second cue you hear as the credits roll, it's not original at all. It's a tracked piece from another Universal creature flick, The Deadly Mantis. Mancini's fingerprints are hidden deep in the soundtrack, long before his fame with The Pink Panther or Moon River. In other words, one of Hollywood's smoothest composers got his start making rocks sound terrifying. Number 3. Paul Frees sets the eerie tone. Before a single actor appears on screen, a deep, thunderous voice warns us about the power of nature gone mad. And that voice belonged to none other than Paul Frees. Though uncredited, Frees was one of the most recognizable voices in entertainment history. He was the voice of God for trailers, a favorite of Walt Disney, and the man behind Boris Badenov in Rocky and Bullwinkle. In The Monolith Monsters, Frees' narration transforms what could have been a slow geological thriller into something apocalyptic. His delivery makes the science sound biblical, like the planet itself is angry. The voice tells you something terrible is coming, even before the story does. Without Frees, those opening minutes wouldn't sound like the end of the world. Number 4. Universal's special effects genius Clifford Stein handled the visuals. When audiences saw mountains of black rock growing out of the desert, they weren't looking at cheap props. They were witnessing the work of Clifford Stein, one of Universal's quietest magicians. Stein had already dazzled audiences with It Came from Outer Space and This Island Earth, and for this film, he built miniature desert landscapes that could crumble, shatter, and grow like living creatures. He used forced perspective, clever matte shots, and handcrafted miniature towers filmed in slow motion to give the illusion of unstoppable growth. In some shots, he even combined real dust clouds with miniature rockfalls to make the destruction feel massive. The trick wasn't just visual, it was emotional. The rocks didn't move like monsters, they spread like a disease. It was pure science turned into spectacle, and Stein made stone come alive. Number 5. Filming took place in Lone Pine, California. To give the illusion of an alien wasteland, the crew didn't have to travel to another planet, just to Lone Pine, California, tucked between the Sierra Nevada mountains and the Mojave Desert. The region's twisted granite formations and open skies had already been immortalized in countless westerns, but in The Monolith Monsters, it became something otherworldly. Under the harsh desert sun, those rocks shimmered like the surface of another world. Dust storms and unpredictable winds constantly fought the production, coating cameras and props with sand. But those same conditions made every shot look authentic, eerie, vast, and lonely. The landscape itself became a character, amplifying the film's message. Nature doesn't need aliens to destroy us. It's the kind of setting that makes you believe the Earth is quietly plotting something. Number 6. Universal's backlot filled in for the town scenes. When the story moves from the desert to the small town of San Angelo, Universal didn't build anything new. They used the studio's own courthouse square set, the same one that later became Hill Valley in Back to the Future. In 1957, though, it stood in for small-town America on the edge of disaster. The crew dressed it up with fake storefronts, dusted everything with sand, and shot it from low angles to make the approaching monolith seem impossibly huge. The same streets where Marty McFly would later ride a skateboard were once the site of a silent geological apocalypse. Universal reused every inch of that square, stretching its budget while giving audiences a familiar sense of Americana before chaos hit. Who knew that the same clock tower square that brought time travel to life once hosted a stone invasion? Number 7. The meteor crash footage wasn't new. That spectacular opening meteor sequence, the one that sets the entire nightmare in motion, wasn't filmed for The Monolith Monsters at all. Universal simply reused meteor crash footage from It Came from Outer Space, 1953, another Jack Arnold classic. It was a clever way to save thousands on special effects while keeping the same cosmic catastrophe energy audiences loved. The reuse was so seamless that most viewers in the 1950s never noticed. The same desert sky, the same streak of fire, and the same camera angles made it feel like part of the same cinematic universe before shared universes even existed. In a strange way, it's as if the two films secretly connect, one crash leading to another alien menace, only this time born from stone instead of space creatures. Universal didn't just recycle film, they recycled fear. Pretty wild so far, right? And we're only halfway through this geological nightmare. From recycled meteors to a director's final film, The Monolith Monsters was built on accidents, genius, and pure 1950s paranoia. If you're loving these hidden stories of old Hollywood sci-fi, make sure to subscribe and hit hype to keep the channel growing like those unstoppable crystals. Now, let's see what other secrets are buried beneath the rocks. Number 8. The story's true monster is geological, not alien. In a decade obsessed with flying saucers and mutant bugs, the Monolith Monsters dared to do something stranger. It made the Earth itself the enemy. There are no tentacled creatures or slimy invaders here. The monster is a geological chain reaction, alien rocks that feed on silicon, draining it from the world around them. Even the victims don't die. They turn to stone, becoming part of the very thing that destroyed them. This twist made the film stand out in a crowded sci-fi landscape. The horror wasn't from space, but from chemistry, an invisible threat that couldn't be reasoned with or destroyed by force. It's science fiction stripped of emotion, leaving only logic and panic. The Earth didn't need aliens to kill us. It could do it all on its own. Number 9. Real living stones exist. As bizarre as the Monolith Monsters seems, it may have been inspired by something that actually exists on Earth, the Trovants of Romania. These mysterious stones appear to grow after heavy rain, swelling in size and even sprouting smaller nodules that resemble offspring. Scientists explain it as a reaction between sand and mineral-rich water that cements the outer layer. But locals long believed the stones were alive. The resemblance to the film's alien crystals is uncanny. Both grow with moisture, both seem self-replicating, and both blur the line between life and geology. Whether or not the filmmakers knew about the Trovants, the coincidence gives the movie's premise an eerie plausibility. It's as if nature itself had already written the script. Sometimes the strangest monsters are the ones hiding in plain sight, right beneath our feet. Number 10. A script born from fear of the unknown. The spark for the Monolith Monsters didn't come from a laboratory or a studio brainstorm. It came from the sky. In the mid-1950s, reports of a blazing meteor streaking over the California desert filled local newspapers. Writers Jack Arnold and Robert M. Fresco seized on the story, imagining what might happen if that meteor carried something far stranger than space dust. Within weeks, Universal had ordered a script. The real-life incident might have lasted seconds, but it ignited a very 1950s kind of panic, a fear of the unknown wrapped in scientific possibility. Arnold and Fresco turned that flash of light into a full-blown allegory about mankind's helplessness before forces it can't understand. The result blended atomic age anxiety with small-town vulnerability, giving birth to one of sci-fi's most original doomsday scenarios. One meteor sighting, one headline, and suddenly, geology became terrifying. Number 11. A Cold War metaphor hiding in plain sight. Beneath all the scientific jargon and stone-crushing chaos, the Monolith Monsters plays like a quiet Cold War warning. The multiplying rocks, mindless, unstoppable, and spreading without end, mirrored America's fear of communism, radiation, and contamination. Film historians have pointed out that the story's tension doesn't come from a single villain, but from the idea of contagion itself. Each crystal shard that breaks off and grows somewhere else feels like a stand-in for ideological spread, faceless, emotionless, and impossible to contain. The town's desperate attempt to stop it with science and salt mirrors the era's obsession with controlling invisible threats, from fallout to propaganda. The film's real message? Fear doesn't always have a face. Sometimes it just multiplies. Number 12. Grant Williams reuses his scientist set. If the laboratory in the Monolith Monsters looks strangely familiar, that's because it literally appeared in another Universal sci-fi classic released the very same year, The Incredible Shrinking Man. Both films starred Grant Williams, and both used the same set for the California Medical Research Institute. Universal simply redressed the walls, swapped out props, and shot it from new angles. It was a textbook 1950s studio move, efficiency disguised as continuity. But the coincidence makes Williams' back-to-back roles feel oddly connected. In one, he's battling living crystals. In the other, he's fighting the infinite void of atomic shrinkage. Both stories pit human intellect against forces beyond comprehension. It's as if Grant Williams never left the lab. The experiment just kept changing. Number 13. Released as a double feature. When the Monolith Monsters hit theaters in 1957, it didn't come alone. It shared the screen with another universal curiosity, Love Slaves of the Amazons. The pairing was typical for the era's double feature circuit, where drive-ins and matinees packed two films for the price of one, often combining wild genres to lure curious crowds. Imagine it. First, you're watching men turn to stone by alien crystals, and minutes later, you're in the jungles of South America surrounded by warrior women. It was less about storytelling cohesion and more about delivering two doses of escapism before the popcorn ran out. Audiences came for the spectacle, and Universal made sure they left feeling like they'd lived through two entirely different worlds in one sitting. Number 14. A shoestring film that became a cult classic. With its modest budget and modest runtime, The Monolith Monsters was never meant to shake the world, yet it quietly earned a permanent place in sci-fi history. Shot quickly and cheaply, it relied on creativity instead of cash, miniature sets, recycled footage, and a script that turned scientific curiosity into cosmic terror. What began as a B-movie filler somehow aged into one of Universal's most imaginative post-atomic tales. Over the years, critics and fans rediscovered it as a kind of minimalist masterpiece. Its slow, creeping sense of doom felt different from the loud creature features of the time. The rocks didn't roar or scream, they just advanced, one collapse at a time. That eerie restraint gave the film a timeless dread that modern viewers still feel today. Sometimes the smallest budgets make the biggest nightmares. Number 15. The film's footage resurfaced decades later. Long after the Monolith Monsters crumbled into cult status, its eerie visuals found new life in the background of other movies. Most notably, a brief clip from the film appears playing on a television in John Carpenter's They Live, 1988, a sly nod from one sci-fi visionary to another. Carpenter, a known fan of 1950s horror, often used old monster flicks inside his films as Easter eggs for sharp-eyed viewers. It's a fitting tribute. Both movies explore invisible invasions that quietly consume humanity, one through television signals, the other through stone. The echo between them turns that old meteor footage into a warning broadcast from the past. Even in the background of another movie, the monoliths kept spreading. Number 16. Its concept inspired modern sci-fi, even video games. The idea of self-replicating mineral growth didn't end with the Monolith Monsters. Decades later, game designers cited the film as inspiration for the mysterious green crystal known as Tiberium in the Command & Conquer series, a substance that spreads uncontrollably, consuming everything in its path. It's the same concept reborn in digital form, nature mutating into a weapon, beautiful and deadly at once. That influence stretches beyond gaming. You can spot echoes of the Monolith Monsters in movies like The Blob, 1988, Annihilation, 2018, and even The Last of Us, where unstoppable growth becomes a metaphor for decay. What started as a low-budget curiosity ended up shaping an entire subgenre of slow apocalypse storytelling. Those black shards never stopped growing. They just evolved into pixels, spores, and code. For a movie about rocks, the Monolith Monsters sure left a lasting impact. What began as a cheap desert thriller ended up influencing decades of science fiction, from Cold War metaphors to video game nightmares. It proved that horror doesn't always need monsters with teeth. Sometimes all it takes is nature itself, doing exactly what it was designed to do. So, which fact surprised you the most? The secret Mancini score? The living stones of Romania? Or the idea that this little B-movie quietly inspired modern sci-fi? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe and hype this video so we can keep digging up more hidden stories from old Hollywood's strangest corners. From radioactive ants to collapsing worlds, the 1950s gave us nightmares that never aged. These films weren't just entertainment, they were warning signs screaming from the silver screen that science and fear had become one. Thanks for spending the night in the golden age of sci-fi. Which movie stole your imagination the most? Drop it in the comments, subscribe, and hype this marathon if you want more. And remember, the future isn't written yet, but in the 1950s, they already tried to warn us.